Welcome to Saint Toga interviews. I have another returning guest. I'm going through my, favorites again, and this time is Daryl, and whose story I would consider as good as anyone's in the SSP circle. And I really recommend you check out his first two videos ever with James Rink, because they'll, be the prequels to this. And yeah, he was a commander pilot for the Solar Warden, and he was the first person to be granted citizenship in the German breakaway civilization. And his story just escalates from there. He went to the Taygetean homeworld and for various reasons became their king for a while. And I wanted this interview to be like a continuation of our previous one. So trying to go for new questions. And my first one was, what prompted you to investigate your SSP memories again after you had buried them?
Well, it was just different things. It was part of my childhood, bits of my childhood that I forgot about were coming back. I was seeing a therapist at the time at the VA, and he was ex-Army. So he understood that, the military will just use you for everything you have. They'll use you for your life, your sanity, anything they want. And so he understood that. And just the more and more I started talking to this guy, well, I remember more before, but he was really the first one I tried to open up to. And his opinion of it, because I asked him one time, he said, I asked him, what do you think about this? This is kind of driving me crazy, like telling you this stuff, and you're not really telling me what you think. And he said, a part of me thinks this is a way to deal with your trauma. And then he said, but a larger part of me believes you. He went on about how somebody's delusional. They kind of sound like water going through like a colander. They just kind of pour through and they just kind of blah, blah, blah. But a person, when they're telling the truth, they do more things like, they go back and forth in the story and then I forgot about this, but then this happened first. And oh yeah, and then that happened. But yeah, I mean, it was probably a lot of him, and it was just, I don't know. First, it was like different traumas from my childhood that started coming back, and then more started coming back. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, yeah. And I forgot. I really blocked it from my mind, the conversation I had before I left the Navy with the executive officer, because I just have a mind like that. I guess if something is just too much, I just have to forget about it. And, it would be too long, and it would just be too much for me to remember all these things. So I think that was the main reason. It started out with, I remembered stuff from my childhood that were traumatizing to me, and then it led up to remembering this. And I remember a lot of the trauma that happened to me in my life was Aquino, because for some reason, I remember Robert telling me, the XO, that like the elder kind of ETs and reptiles, but even like, Pleiadians and stuff like that, most fifth density beings can go forward down a timeline, and that's about it. But ones that are more experienced, they can actually go backwards in your timeline, and they can affect things. They can influence people to do things to you. They can make your life really difficult. And since I was in his presence, he was doing things like that. He was influencing people to hurt me as a child.
Yeah, and was this Aquino in the body of that snake being, or Aquino in the body that we know?
It was the snake being. I forget what the snake being said his name was, but as I said, people referred to him as Aquino. The Satanists in the bar and stuff like that, when they would tell me certain things, like, oh yeah, Aquino did that to you. Like they would kind of like let you know. But it was almost like they referred to him more of it as Aquino, even though he was this reptilian being. And he even saw himself. He had like this kind of weird, I don't know how you explain it, like this complex where he seemed to think he was more like Aquino than he was this being. Maybe from spending so much time in the body, I really don't know. But yeah, he kind of saw himself almost more as Aquino, even though he told me he was some sort of ancient god from Egypt. He was once worshipped in ancient Egypt, he told me, and that's how old he was. But yeah, I mean, Aquino saw himself, is what I'm trying to say. The reptile kind of saw himself more like Aquino, it seemed like. Maybe because he spent so much time in the body. I really don't know why.
Okay, yeah, that's tough to decipher. And would you say the therapy itself helped you remember, and do you recommend that other assets go through that?
I mean, yeah, but you have to have a doctor that's willing to, hear things like that. I always say, for vets and stuff, it's always better to have a veteran because they realize what the military's like. And I mean, yeah, of course, as you're willing to have a doctor that's just willing just to listen as your story unfolds in your mind, then yeah, of course. I mean, of course, anybody should talk about that with someone they trust.
And just quickly, does it happen, the recall, in your sleep or during meditation or what?
It's strange because I was told that I would remember it in real time, and in the sense that, a lot of it was just everyday life and monotonous and things like that, especially on the ship. So really no real memories were created, but, big events in your life, things like that. Those are the memories that you remember. And it's almost, for me, it's like kind of like I wake up and it's almost like I did have a dream or something. And I'm trying to recall this, and I'm thinking, and I'm making eggs in the morning, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, and then that happened, and then this happened. It's kind of like that. That's a huge part of it. And I always tell people that if this guy didn't tell me all these things that happened to me, Robert, yeah, I would have just thought maybe they were just strange memories or bad dreams or something like that. But he confirmed all this stuff to me, and he was just
might as well fast forward to that question. Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he wanted to activate you?
Well, he knew that I did have some memory. He could tell that, and I guess maybe he thought it was like a guiding way of trying to get me, because he told me that most people who have memories of the 20-year and back, they commit suicide within the first 6 months. And I believe this was a way of trying to help me, to let me know that, like, yeah, this is real. This isn't just a hallucination. And it was also, I think he had a lot of guilt because he was forced to participate in my torture with Aquino. And for me, it was, at this time, it was almost 2 years. But for him, it was only 5 days ago, because he time traveled so much. So he just got done time traveling to where I was at this point, like another almost 2 years. But, for him, it was only 5 days. And I think he really felt bad that he was forced to do that. And he would always use the excuse of, and when I asked him why he would do these things or things like that, he would say, they'd hurt my daughter if I didn't do it. So they get to your family. And I remember when I was with them and stuff like that, he would say the same things, the Pleiadians, Taygetans. He would say, yeah, if I just made like a passing joke, like, well, what if I just stayed here? And he said, don't even say that, Daryl. He said, they'll hurt my daughter if you don't come back. They'll take it out on me, on my daughter. And that was just the whole event of, poking the reptile in the eye. And they were pretty upset about that. They didn't know what was happening when they were trying to put me into the density chair, in the density chamber.
Right. And you predicted that your career return would finish either this spring or the following, and I might as well check if that has occurred yet.
You know what? I don't think it did, because I remember, like I said, the memories are real time, but I also remember having a conversation with him where he said they extended your time for 3 years because they liked you so much, not just, the Navy and stuff like that, but just all of it, because the way I interacted with these people and they liked me. But then I remember a memory of saying I still have a year left whenever he wanted to take me back. So I think it was like 2 more years. I got an additional 2 years to stay there, because it was supposed to be 3, but then they wound up taking me back a year early. Maybe they thought I was going to, I don't know, run or something, or maybe it was just something that had to do with time travel. Maybe it was just the right time to do it. I don't know. But yeah, it was. I remember him telling me before I left the Navy in the office that, you were given an extra 3 years.
Right. And that will probably come with major breakthroughs whenever that does happen. And did sharing consciousness for such a long period, 20 years, has it been burdensome for you here?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think it almost feels like the me in the program is getting the better half, and I'm kind of getting the worse half, and yeah, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm jealous of them, maybe because I have these memories and I want to come back and things like that, but I think
might be tip density.
I'm sorry?
Might be because of the different density.
Yes, yes, and also because of you know, I'm partially in fifth density too, as Robert told me that. And that was something else that happened to me in my childhood, and I really think it was the Taygetans that did that, and it had to do. There was a woman that I'm not sure how she did it. It was a friend of my sister, and it was Halloween, and I remember she grabbed me by the arm and she took me in, and she knew my father and I were telepaths, and she was too, and she showed me to her mom, and her mom said something like. You say his father can do it? And she said, yes. And she said, and the mother? And she said, not as well. And she said, what about the sister? And she said, no. And I don't know what she did. I was a young kid. I was probably 11. She like took my chin and kind of lifted my head up to look into my eyes. And it was just like the whole room was just like engulfed with like orange and red and blue, like flecks of blue. It was like the whole room. And I remember the girls, it was like a Halloween party and the girls were outside screaming. Some of them could see it, but my sister couldn't see it. And she kind of shook my head to snap me out of it. And after that, it was really strange. It felt like I was hallucinating. It felt like I was really, I was only a little kid. I never hallucinated before, but it was like that feeling. It was like, and it lasted, I guess, for the rest of my life. Maybe I just got used to it. But I remember just for years, it was really difficult for me to handle. And I really think it was them trying to get me ready for this because they knew it was going to happen because they're really good at, looking back and forth on timelines. They knew. So I think it was, and I think that's how I got partially into fifth density. And then Robert even realized that. And he said, so the chair won't help you because it was done at a different period of time and the chair can't do it. So, you're just going to, I was just kind of, I don't know, stuck like that. But yeah, partially in fifth density, I think that's makes it really very difficult. And yeah, sharing the timelines.
Yeah, it seems like they were priming you for it, and even you said minors get pushed, so pretty much everyone into higher density artificially. And does that mean that every off-world experience that you shouldn't have witnessed has happened in 5D? I mean, a density.
Yes, and I think for a lot of the people that go through this, it's not really the mind wipe that's difficult. It's as far as difficult to remember. It's more of just trying to put fifth density like memories into third density words because it's a lot more than just. It's difficult to explain that your entire reality is different. And I remember like being in the mines and talking about density sickness and going kind of shifting back into third and going into fifth, and everything got really fast all of a sudden. Like all the people around me seemed like they were going very fast and talking very fast. And I think that is a large part of difficulty to remember because I could just remember things like, I don't know, maybe going 5 years down my timeline and not even realizing why it's happening or how it's happening and kind of living my life 5 years from now, still in the program and everything else. And me at that present time, realizing this has happened, that I'm kind of like in the past, kind of living this life in my body. And that's kind of how it feels when you go down your own timeline. It's almost like you kind of just go forward and you're experiencing. You're not outside yourself, you're in yourself, but you're kind of the separate consciousness thinking like, oh, wow, what's happening and what's going to happen next. And then I would just come back, and that would happen for 30 seconds or so. And I would come back. So fifth density, it's a lot more than, it's difficult to explain. And also the whole thing of a collective is a big thing too, where maybe if you're with 2 or 3 other people, not so much. But if you're with 5 or 6 other people, you kind of find yourselves swimming in each other's thoughts. When it first happens, you don't know if these are your thoughts or they're their thoughts. It's very hard to explain. So it's a lot more than just density. It's the reality of it is completely different.
So it's a bit like a hive mind, I guess. But are there no other like 3D extraterrestrials? Are we unique in that sense? And also, are animals in second density?
Yeah, I remember being told about that too. Like, I believe the way he explained it to me was the Earth, higher density beings can manipulate lower densities, and the Earth is first. So we can mine the Earth, we can grow things from the Earth. Animals are second, and we use them for food. We can use other animals to herd them and things like that, like dogs with sheep and cattle like that, and then using horses and everything like that. And then we're third density. And I remember him talking about, I said something like, because I remember the kids and all that in the cages, and I really didn't remember that he wasn't really involved in that, and he didn't like that. But I just thought it was a very horrible thing. And I said, you're going to hell for this. I said that, and he said, there is no hell. And I said, but there's a heaven. And he said, of sorts. And then he said, if there is a hell, we're in it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, third density is hell. He said, like, there's really no other world that he knew of right now that experiences kind of third density. And then fourth is more like the spirit world kind of thing. I remember we were talking about Aquino. And, well, first we were talking about the Master Chief, who was an off-world German, and he was a telepath. And he said, we should stop talking about him now. And I said, why? He said, if we concentrate on him too much, he'll be able to hear us. He's just in the room next door. And I said, well, how does it usually work? Telepathy. And he said, line of sight. And he said, otherwise it's remote viewing. He's like, but that's possible too. People can do that too. And then we started talking about Aquino. And then he said, we should stop talking about Aquino now. Even though he was away, he wanted me to go back in the chair because Aquino was off that base now.
But Aquino was only fourth.
Yeah, Aquino was fourth. And he said, we should stop talking about Aquino now. And I said, why? He said, we could conjure him. And I said, what? And he said, he's fourth density. He's like, that's kind of like spirit world, astral plane. He said, he could be in this room right now and we wouldn't know it. He said, the only reason you could see him in the underground caverns is because he showed himself to you. He said, I'd have a better chance of seeing him because I'm fifth density. He said, you're only partially in fifth density. But even I might be able to see him. So that's kind of like a weird, eerie thing. I don't know. The whole ET thing is a lot more spiritual and a lot less technological. And then fifth density is more like you're more advanced spiritually, you're more advanced technologically kind of thing. And then the only thing he really knew was, he said the highest density we know of is ninth. And I think it was the Arturians he said were ninth, the deep blue people. And he said, not even they know of any other higher density. And he said there could be a higher density, but there's not really one that we know of. Like nobody really knows of that. That's as far as what I remember.
It's probably beyond physical at that point.
Yeah, it's probably much higher spiritual plane. But he said as far as like he knew, and as far as what they knew and things like that in the secret space program and other ETs knew, that I believe that's what he said. Ninth density is like the highest it goes. He said there could be more beyond that, but we don't know of it.
Well, this whole density topic puts a lot of pieces together, but at the same time, you're about the only person in the SSP ring that really stresses it. So you're up against it in that way. But I do believe it. So did Robert, mention why the jump was from third to fifth and not like fourth?
Well, like I said, most of the ETs we deal with are fifth density. We don't deal with the fourth as much. And fourth, like I said, it's more of like kind of like where the archons are and the astral plane and the the reptiles and things like that. And he also said that we can through training and stuff like that, naturally go from third to fourth density because that's like astral projection and stuff like that. That's real, and we could do that. But he said the reptiles can't do that. They can't go from fourth to fifth density. So that density chamber, he said it's their technology. It was reptilian technology because it was a way for them to be able to compete with fifth density and, work with them or fight against them or whatever. He said that density chamber was actually created by the reptilians to artificially get pushed into fifth density.
And could you resume being artificially pushed into fifth density while on Earth? And because I guess that was the case with Robert, that he wasn't just naturally there, or was he?
Yeah, he could resume it, but it's like third density affects you. You know what I mean? Like even like the Taygetans and stuff, I don't think they like to be on a third density world like Earth for more than 2 days because it can affect you somehow. But that's how he was able to control things like his speed and stuff like that. And he was used to just being in third density, but I'm not really sure, how much it would affect you. It's just something, it's just not that. It's just not the density. The ETs don't like being here because we are being poisoned through our air and our water and things like that. And it causes you to age prematurely. You know, I don't know what you want to call them, the Satanists, the reptiles, whatever you want to say. They don't want us to live too long because they just don't want us to get wise to what's happening. They're afraid of us. You know, they're afraid
Right.
of our potential.
A lot of them, there's many types. But so fifth density, you sometimes describe it as, idyllic, but sometimes that is too intense, and that third is more comfortable, but at the same time much more limited. So in the end, which would you say you prefer?
I mean, fifth density, but I remember they actually can create artificial density fields on ships and the moon and stuff like that. So it was like an artificial fifth density. And it was very intense. Yeah, but especially whenever you first get pushed into third to fifth density, it's very intense. And your mind almost can't handle it. It takes a while to get used to it. But I remember the artificial density shield on the ship compared to their home world. Their home world was very comfortable. The ship seemed more intense. Lights seemed brighter. Things seemed to just come at you faster. But I remember on their actual world, where that was a fifth density world, that was a lot more comfortable than the ship itself. So the artificial density fields that they could create on ships and even on the moon and stuff like that, they're a lot more artificial, to say the least.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the density also, like I said, depends on location. And like if you go further into the Earth, you get more and more towards the fifth, I guess. But do you think you could have slowly like acclimated to the 5D Taygetan homeworlds if given enough time, just by yourself without the device?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, they could definitely help you with that, I'm sure. They could definitely train you how to do it. But I never really thought about that. But I mean, I think it's kind of like if you're in a world that has a fifth density, it might take a little while for you to catch on. But yeah, I think you would just naturally kind of become part of that density.
And is the higher density invisible to the person in the inferior one?
Yeah, but if you're talking about being on that world, then you would be in that density, and I'm sure it would kind of be confusing. And like I said, it feels like a lot coming at you at once. But yeah, I think it would probably at first it would be maybe invisible to that person. But
yeah, you would either acclimate to it on the spot or not at all. I would guess from what I understand. And
that was another reason why I wanted you to have like 110 IQ. I remember he told me, because you have to, even the work on the mines of the moon, you have to have at least 110 IQ, because something about the density shift, the density change, you need to have like a higher IQ to be able to handle all that information at once.
Right. So that's the entry point for getting bumped into fifth, I guess 110. So you can't just take animals. And is the lowering back to third of assets done in order to limit their ability, or why?
Why is a person lowered back into third after they're done with the program?
Yeah, by and large, because I guess not all.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't be able to cope because, you realize that it's almost like you're supposed to be fifth density. We're kind of artificially kept in the third density. And once you get that feeling and you live in that density, you really realize that you've been cheated. It's a feeling like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted me to go into the chair so badly, because he didn't realize this happened in my childhood. As he was looking down my timeline, he saw like, oh yeah, you have memories of this in the future. So that's what happened to you. It happened to you when you were a boy. But he realized that I was still partially in fifth density, and it's just difficult. It's just difficult to deal with this artificial lower density that he described as hell. There is no hell, but if there is one, Earth is it, because it's third density.
Yeah, Stuart Swerdlow described it as the Syria of the galaxy. And also, I think you said that only 4 density and above can even see and go through the portals.
Yes. He told me that portal, that Babylonian portal that they had in the courtyard of the Vatican for a while, he said that's an actual real portal, a Stargate. He said, but we can't see it or go through them. And that's another reason they put you into fifth density, because only fourth density and above can see and use portals. And I asked him, I said, well, what if that reptile, because he was carrying me, tried to like put me through the, looking glass portal before, if I was only third density or partially in fifth, before I was in fifth density. He said you just would have like fell out of his arm. You just would have got pushed out. Even if it was somebody who was holding you, you still couldn't use a portal.
And it's possible that a lot of us have experienced like glimpses of 5D whenever we have like a Kundalini activation or like an awakening or something, right? Because I'm sure that people will like know if they're partly in 5D as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's other people like that. And I was told that what that woman did was like by just somebody else who's familiar with these things, she somehow changed my DNA. And by changing my DNA, it made me partial to fifth density. But yeah, I'm sure other people, at the corner of their eye or however you want to explain it, do see portals and things like that from time to time.
Right. Okay, let's go back to the poking of the reptilian that you mentioned earlier. Why did it particularly translate to your Dark Fleet service? Was the reptile working for both, or what?
Well, it was, at first it was the mines of the moon. I was in the mines, and that was going to be punishment. And that's something that they do to people if they really do something bad, like do something bad to a politician's family or a high-ranking officer's family or something like that, you might wind up in the mines of the moon. And sometimes they'll give you 40 years on the mines of the moon. They'll beat you pretty hard, and it's like a slavery. You're basically a slave, and they don't wipe your mind, and they just send you back. They just age regress you and they send you back in time, and don't bother wiping your mind. And almost all of them kill themselves because it's very harsh. And so that was going to be my original punishment. That's what I had in store, was 40 years and no mind wipe. And it just happened to be Robert was there because he kind of kept tabs on people who were in the program. And there was like a couple people on base. I remember he told me that were on this program as well, and he would kind of check up on them every now and again. And he was on the moon, I remember, and he was talking to a German. And the German kind of had some kind of device. I'm not sure what it was, like a box or something. I just held it in front of me. And then he started yelling at this other German that got me stuck there in German. And then he said, come with me. And that's how I got into the Dark Fleet, because he saw my scores and saw that I was, more adept for something more than just, being in mines.
Yeah. So Robert really came through for you that time.
Yeah, he helped me out. Yeah, he was a good friend.
And how did you manage to get buff in the beginning of the 20 and back? Was it like an overnight transformation, or was it just regen tanks, or what?
Well, when I got back, you mean?
Oh, so it was gradual.
Oh, the age regression and stuff like that?
No, when you first got to like the German faction, you said you were really buff and you could hardly sit down from the muscle.
Oh, you're right. That was like the tech they put in their body. I think like the whole thing was is they found, they figured that a stronger person had a better way to survive, better survival rate than, somebody who's slimmer and faster. Because like I said, you were so big, you kind of got winded sometimes. I remember that. And no, that was just the tech they put in your body. It was like the technology they had. It would artificially, just do the microscopic tears in muscles and repair and tear, and and it would accelerate it. So yeah, within a few months, you were very big in the Dark Fleet.
But you were regenerated in the green tanks from time to time.
Well, that was another thing that I learned too. You mean the healing tanks?
Yeah, the ones based on Black Goo that are famous in the German faction. Yeah.
Well, those are. If you want to go into that a little bit, I remember him telling me that those really aren't good for you, in the sense that they kind of take part of you away from you, and like your consciousness, your soul, or something. That's only done for really with bad injuries, getting blown in half or something when you're clinically dead. They try to use med beds any other time. And I remember in the Dark Fleet, it happened to me. He also said being cloned. And this is a question you asked me earlier, and I forgot about it. Robert told me this. You said that, do you think did you ever die? Like, were you ever clinically dead? And he told me the third day I was on Mars, I was killed. And we were overrun by reptiles. I remember it, and they killed us. And because, you know, it's just not all the same. Like, not all the reptiles, as you said before, not all are negative and not all are on this side. And we were attacking them, and they overran us, and we were killed. And he was telling me this in the office before I got out of the Navy, and I just kept on going. You know, I had this real dilemma in the sense of I'm just a clone. And he said that, you know, he wanted me to go back in the chair because he didn't want me to kill myself. But I was thinking, well, I'm just a clone, so what's the point? Like, why shouldn't I just kill myself? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why am I even here? I'm just a clone. And he said they were able to salvage your conscience, is how he put it. And I said, well, what's that? Like, I really don't know what he's talking about. And he said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better. He said, the part that makes you, you. He said that they put you in exact same clone of your body. They were able to salvage your conscience, and it's you. You know, the part that makes you, you, it's there. And yeah, but it took me a while to get over that. Like, I had, like, you know, I kept on going back and forth for a good 5 minutes, just kind of in a panic almost of just, you know, what's the point? I'm already dead. I'm already a clone. And he said, no, they're able to salvage your conscience. So they have technology to be able to, you know, even if the person dies, they can salvage the consciousness and then just grow an exact clone and put the consciousness into that clone.
Yeah, but I think they don't even refer to such a case as a clone if they just rebuild you using the green regeneration tank, because they consider it your original body just rebuilt. And they can do it as long as it's no older than 4 weeks. Then you still lose some memory the longer you stay away from a body, but they can still salvage you mostly entirely.
Well, that's what I said to him. I said, you mean the body of Daryl that my mother gave birth to? You mean his bones are rotting on Mars right now? He said, yes. So it was just like an exact copy of me that they made. So they weren't able to salvage the body, I guess. The reptiles probably ate it. I don't even know. But it was just the whole point of the consciousness was still there. The soul was still there. It was an exact replica of me in every way. But they were just able to put my consciousness into it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how they operate. What about, so you met your clone when they wanted to show who's boss in the master's layer there, but also you said that in the beginning, the blonde petty officer said that he got to meet his own like time loop self, which was also in the base of St. Mawgan. So does this happen where you can actually get to meet your time loop self, not just your clone, but your same consciousness?
Yeah, yes, you can, and there's no adverse effects or anything like that. Like in the movie, it's like worlds don't collide if you meet yourself. I remember he wanted to keep a secret. You know, he didn't want me to tell the guy, and he told me that that's why he was growing the blonde mustache. It was almost like a disguise, so the guy wouldn't recognize him. But yeah, I remember him talking to him at the quarterdeck, kind of scolding him almost like a father figure if he acted up or something like that.
So, and also since we're on the Dark Fleet, how far could you jump on Mars without like a suit?
Oh, pretty far. Oh, without the suit? No, without the suit, I think the gravity was relatively the same. But we always wore suits because, as I said before, there is oxygen, but not as much as Earth. And it's one of those things where you could, you know, without air and outside air supply, you could sit down or you could walk. But if you tried to run or anything like that, you would pass out from oxygen deprivation. So we always wore suits. But I really don't think the gravity was much more different than Earth.
Oh, interesting. And so you did try to breathe without the suit, so you could see for yourself. Yeah.
I mean, I would talk to the other beings I saw there and things like that, mantids and reptiles, if we were trying to negotiate with them. So, you know, I would show them my face when we were talking, and that wasn't difficult at all.
Although I hear that the mantises prefer you with the suit on because they have their skeleton on the outside and they get freaked out when you see like the soft tissue of others.
Yeah, maybe because I remember if they had a really good sense of humor, you can get them laughing sometimes. And when they laughed, their mandibles would open up. And they were so telepathic that they knew it was disturbing to you, so they would cover their mouths when they laughed. I remember that.
And have you seen any other like notable flora or fauna on Mars? Like I think you said something about large monitor lizards. And have you seen bodies of water?
Well, I I remember there being snow at the caps a little bit, and redwood trees, almost something like big, huge trees. And but everywhere else, I don't think there was very much water. I think that they would have to dig wells and things like that to find water everywhere else. And yeah, there were like desert shrubs, things like the small shrubs you would see. And yeah, like big lizards, big monitor four-legged lizards everywhere.
And did you witness any like what's called anti-telephoning, or when you fail a mission, they time travel you and rescue you before it happened, so as to avoid it, the bad outcome?
I don't remember anything like that. No, I don't. I don't remember anything like
That might, you might as well have been a part of it, just haven't been told. But so
yeah, that's the thing about time travel. If you're not involved, then you don't even know what happened. Yeah.
yeah.
Unless you're actually involved in the time travel.
And I think you at one point said that some of the glasspads, while generally telepathic, also reacted to finger gestures.
Who is this?
I think the woman in the moon condominium, the nurse, also could interact with the glasspad via like gestures, not just telepathy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like especially if you wanted to magnify an image or something like that. Yeah, you could put your hand to the image and go and spread your fingers out, and it would magnify the image. And you could put your finger into it and spin the image around, so you could see all the 360 degrees of the image and things like that. Yeah.
So it was holographic.
Yeah, it was holographic. Like you could actually put your hand on the smart glass pad and kind of pull out the image, and then you can open your finger.
I wanted to mention that because that's probably what we're looking at in the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they already have, what is that? They already have that Samsung phone that's clear. I mean, I've seen the ads for that. I don't know if it's true or not, but it looks pretty much like a small glass pad. Yeah.
Yeah, but they still don't have it, so you can interact really with no latency at all. So we're a long way away. But also, were you like privy to movies or like video games or similar entertainment in your free time on Mars?
On Mars, I remember the Dark Fleet. I think I do remember because I brought it up almost as like a way to relate to them. The Germans one time, it was I believe that they did like movies and they did like Disney movies. You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny that they would watch Disney animation, but they like movies in general, and they like the music I played too. And I got to a point where I just didn't play classical music. I remember the first officer, the German who liked me, as a gift, he bought me an electric guitar, and I would play electric guitar for him too, not just classical. So they did like more modern stuff, like as far as that, music and movies and things like that.
Cool. And what did they take you to their home world, did they say? Like, and what was the rest of your service going to look like in Dark Fleet?
Well, whenever they offered me, there was a very high-ranking officer I've never seen before. I guess it's general status, something like that. And it was when the reptiles, they took me into their lair, and they said, "You're doing a very good job." I was getting everything they want, all the mantids they want, things like that. The mantids are very good with DNA, so they wanted them to scan their consciousness, their mind, to figure out more about DNA manipulation and things like that. And I was getting everything they wanted, and the reptile told me, "You know, you're doing a very good job, and when you get back, I'll tell them not to be so hard on you." And I never knew them to do that, to give you actually congratulate you for anything like that. And then the Germans, I left, and they were with me when this was happening. And this one high-ranking German took me to the side, and he said, "He's lying to you." He said, "Whenever you get back, they're going to tear you apart." And he said, "We would like you to join he said, "The only living relatives you have are your mother and your sister. And we would like you to join the Dark Fleet full time." And I thought about it, and I said, "Are there horses on your world?" And he said, "I own 2 horses." And I said, "That's nice. I think horses are beautiful." And I told him I wanted to be like him. And he said, "You mean an officer?" And I said, "No." I said, "Well, if I earned that, then yes, but I want to be a German." I said, "I want to German citizenship. I want to be able to own land. I want to have a German wife, and I want to be able to have German children with her. And yeah, that's how it happened. That's how it was just me taking the initiative to just ask. And yeah, that's how it happened. And they agreed to it. It was like the day later they said that, the higher ups agreed, and you can become a German citizenship. You can become a German citizen.
Yeah, but it's doubtful that the royal cast would have lied to you. So they probably did actually show a bit of like compassion, you could say, when they said that they would go easy on you.
Anybody could have been lying. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe the Germans just wanted me for themselves, or I don't know. But anybody could have been lying. Yeah.
So let's go to that home world of the Germans, or capital planet. By the way, does the name Centurion ring a bell?
It is. I mean, yeah. It is familiar to me. Yeah, the message you gave me before. It's a familiar name, but I mean, I can't be 100%. Basically, most of the names I do remember is what I was told by Robert. For some reason, during the mind wipe process, names and faces are difficult for me to remember. But yes, that's familiar. I mean, it resonated, as they say.
Right. And did the German world have paper money? And was it like $10 equivalent to like 1 franc?
Well, I remember actually, yeah, they did have money. I asked the first officer, German, the second in command of the ship, as far as the Germans were concerned. I said, "Can I have some money?" And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I don't have any money. If I meet a woman, I want to be able to take her out. I want to get clothes. I want to go swimming. I had all these things I wanted to do." And he gave me, and it was francs too, I remember. But the pictures were different. The money was different. I almost think kind of reminds me of like that the gold money that they are showing. I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not. Kind of like that laminated gold. It almost kind of seemed like that. And he gave me, I think it was about 500 francs. And it was like what money was worth back in the 50s. It was, because I remember I went to a tailor. They had tailors there, and I bought a fitted suit. I bought shoes. I bought a hat. They wore fedoras, like I said. I bought swimming clothes. I bought towels. And I still have like, I don't even know, probably 300 francs left. So he gave me a big loan. He loaned me like 500 francs, but it wasn't like in the sense of like today's standards of money. It was like probably more like the 50s, if not better, the currency.
And they're so private about any information getting out about their worlds that even the XO didn't know what their worlds looked like and had to ask you.
Yeah, he had to ask me, and I told him, it looked like the 40s. Men wore suits and fedoras, and women wore dresses. I remember that I told him there was like kind of like a public transit system, where it was almost like sidewalks. There were branches that kind of went out and went onto a main sidewalk, and it went very fast, and you were in like a tube, and it went about 50 miles an hour. I remember when stops came up and stuff, kind of like a hologram just appeared, like in the center of the tube, and alerted you, that this next stop is coming up. And I remember this men leaning back, and they were looking at smart glass pads, like they were reading the paper. And kids would go on it too, but I don't really remember very many women. They actually had like a shuttle system that mostly elderly and like pregnant women and women with kids and stuff like that. They kind of took the shuttle system, but it was mostly men that took like this very fast sidewalk. It almost seemed like that. I remember that.
Did it not like give you vertigo? And also, would you like to see something like that implemented here?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it was a very good system, public transit system, but no, it gave you no kind of vertigo, and it kind of like whenever you first hit the main one, it kind of sped you up on these smaller sidewalks, these branches. It sped you up slowly, and then you hit a main one, and you kind of went back a little bit when you hit the main one and kind of catch yourself a little bit. Maybe that's why the elderly and pregnant women are on it. I mean, you did have a run of risk of it to fall a little bit, but it wasn't too great. But I mean, you were in this tube, and it just felt like you weren't even really, once you hit that inertia, you really didn't feel like you were moving anymore once you hit this main tube. And there was
it's like on a train.
Air or anything. Yeah, like on a train. Exactly.
And what were the tallest buildings? And did any of them look really old, like older than the 40s?
Well, they just had that classic kind of European look, the buildings to them. very Deutsch, I guess you would say. But it was, I do remember like being in like a square area where it was like a market, almost like a farmer's market, where there were, you know, stands selling things in a circle, in a circular square area. Maybe there was a statue in the middle of it. It was something like that. And I think there were taller buildings, but a majority of the buildings were only like, you know, 2 to 4 stories high. It was very old fashioned like that.
And were the streets made of asphalt or like similar pitch or something? And what cars did they drive?
Now, I don't really remember cars. I think maybe there was like kind of like there was kind of almost something like kind of Tesla looking kind of vehicles almost. I don't remember if they hovered, if they were on the ground. I remember a lot of the roads were cobblestone. They kept like that cobblestone look. I think they just wanted to keep that old world kind of look and feeling. But yeah, I remember the roads and stuff seemed to be kind of like cobblestone. Maybe not as bumpy, but just kind of like that same look.
So they were into aesthetics.
Exactly. Yeah. They like to look. From the time they left their world, they wanted to keep it that way. It was almost like they were in a time capsule, but very advanced public transit and technology and everything else.
And they probably were able to maintain this like freezing of the culture thanks to not allowing any visitors.
Probably, yeah. And I was confronted by like constables about it as well when I was on their world, because I didn't speak German very well, and I was at a market, and they noticed I was having difficulty, you know, asking for something, and I asked the guy if he could speak English, and all of them could speak English because, you know, English is a major language on Earth, and they're infiltrators. They're kind of, not all of them become that, but I think it's just part of their culture because a lot of them are spies and stuff like that on Earth. So I'm sure they're taught many languages, but they knew English. And I remember they asked me, and I actually had them like a form that was notarized, like I had a raised seal on it. That it was from the person in charge of this town. I'm not sure, like the mayor or whatever, and that high-ranking officer that gave me the authority to walk out there. It was almost like a green card, and they never saw anything like that before. So they didn't know what to think. These constables, yeah.
But did you find out why there are so many Germans posing as something else, like on Earth, as spies?
Well, I mean, because they work for the Reptilian Empire, and they're like a vassal state for them. And yeah, I mean, they speak perfect, you know, American English. I'm sure if they went to a different language, they could, you know, different country, they could master those accents. But I remember the Master Chief, who was third in command, he was an off-world German. He was also overweight. And I remember I asked Robert, like I remembered in the Dark Fleet, the Germans weren't really, you know, really big, like, you know, the rest of us who were just, you know, got stuck in the program, but they were like pretty big guys. They looked like they could bench 350 pounds, I guess, somewhere around there, 400. And he was overweight. And I said, well, I remember them being in really good shape. I said, why is he overweight? You know, is the tech in his body, did they use it to slow down his metabolism? He said, yes. And I said, well, and I remember there was another guy who was a chief, and he had a mustache, but he was very skinny and he wore glasses. This Master Chief wore glasses. None of them wore glasses, I remember, on their world or on the ship. And I said, why do they do that? And he said, well, we can't just have a bunch of Ubermen running around on base now, can we? And I said, talk about attention to detail. And he said, yes. So it was like almost like a way to disguise them so there wasn't just a bunch of fit dudes. Only really the S3, he was like the fourth in command. And he told me he was on my ship. And I'm pretty sure he was the first officer that I became friends with. He was in good shape, but he wore glasses. He was like the legal officer of the base. And I had met him before. He was a lieutenant. So they, like I said, they time travel so much. And I remember being on the quarterdeck one time, and I got them to like Elton John on the ship. I played more than just guitar. I figured this is a way out, so I might as well learn more instruments. So I started learning piano and violin and flute. And they really liked Elton John. I don't know. Maybe it's a working class. I don't know. But it was that's the S3 that got the lieutenant I knew that was probably on my ship with glasses, and it was the skinny chief with the mustache talking together. We were talking about how much he liked Elton John. And I remember he said to the guy, he said, "Isn't he supposed to be with us now?" Like he kind of whispered to him, like, "Why is he here?" He was, I thought, because he didn't know that, you know, I had come, you know, they time traveled so much they got confused. The time traveling gets confusing. And he asked me, he said, "Do you like Elton John?" I said, "Not really." I said, "I like Billy Joel." And he said, "Oh, well, he must be good too." But he was talking to me like he knew me, and it was weird. They, you know, I would hear things like that a lot. Like people would kind of whisper, like, "Hey, what's he doing here? Like, why is he still here?" And they didn't know. They thought I was supposed to be in the dark fleet with them, and they hadn't realized yet. Maybe they were from the past or future, but you know, they try to keep them this kind of one age. They age regress them and stuff. They try to, and even the Germans are. You know, they probably had to take like a sacrifice because they had to be in our third density for so long. Because their world was more like it was a fifth density world. And I don't know if we would live like over 3,000 years like the Taygetans or anything like that. But I'm sure we would live at least hundreds of years, you know, without all this interference from chemtrails and poisoning in the food, poisoning in the water. And another thing he told me was, thinking of it, was he said vaccines. He told me that like disease is pretty much, I mean, we have diseases, but most of them are created. We have bacteria is what he said. He said, but viruses are false. Cancer is not
Thank
real.
you.
Yeah, things like that. And he said that a majority of it nowadays, we get it through when we're babies. And he said that, why do you think polio came 10 years after it became mandatory, you know, to go to school and stuff for kids? He said polio, it was all, you know, it's engineered. It's just a way to thin out the herd, you know, and to shorten our life expectancy so we don't get too wise to what's happening. We're pretty much like dying at 70, 75, 80. That's like an infant compared to other ETs. Not really an infant, but you're still considered young.
Yeah, I just hope this video will make the censors on YouTube, you know. But
Yeah.
did they not have old people then, or almost none? What was the average age?
I would say the average age looked about, they almost locked into their peak, kind of like other ETs do. So it was, you know, about 20 years old for women and about 27 for men. But, you know, you saw kids running around. And I remember the kids looked kind of like our gang, like little rascals almost. They wore like tweed hats and stuff like that, and knickerbockers, things like that, old-fashioned clothes. But yeah, they did have elderly. They did have older people. I remember the high-ranking officer that talked to me about joining the Dark Fleet. He had a little bit of gray in his hair, you know. But they do have age regression. But, you know, age regression has limitations. You can only really be age regressed. As far as us, now if they have longer life expectancies, then it would be more. But as far as us, it's only about 40 years we can be age regressed. But after that, you start getting psychological damage. You can keep on getting age regressed, but it'll slowly drive you mad. And I remember Robert, he told me that, I said, well, how many times have you been age regressed? I was talking to him, and he said, I lost count. And I said, well, you have to have a ballpark. And he said, well, you know, ballpark, he said, 17, 18 times. And I said, you know, so what are you, 360, 380 years old? And he said, closer to 400. And I said, well, how often do you get a psyche eval? And he told me about, you know, the psychological damage to you. And he said, every 2 weeks. It was just like a regular thing he had to go through to see if he was sound of mind. But yeah, I mean, it does have limitations, but, you know, ETs and us and, you know, the Germans as well could be age regressed.
Well, the way I have to frame that is that he could do it because he was fifth density, so the same rules didn't apply.
Well, I mean, maybe, but he seemed like it was this, you know, it still wasn't good for you, this psychologically, to be age regressed. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it can, you know, it can drive you crazy. It can make you mad. And so they have to kind of watch out for you, you know, to see if you're still sound of mind. And I'm sure they had higher technology than just giving you, you know, Rorschach tests and stuff like that to see if your sanity was sound. But, you know.
Yeah. And so their home world, was it also inhabited by ETs, or was the UN like building the only place where you saw any?
UN building was only like that. Yeah, the German world, it was only other Germans. I remember that. It was them.
Right. And the German officer there referred to Taygetans as their enemies. And was that actually like an ongoing theme? You heard that from others as well?
Well, I mean, on their world, they really kind of isolated just the regular people, just the civilians. They really weren't involved in it in any way. They were just people living their lives just like we would. But I just remember that time, yeah, like when he told me we're going to go meet these people and they're not going to attack the master, but just in case, he said, be ready.
So they didn't have like a particular grudge against them.
No, and that's what I mean. That's a fifth density thing. You really don't. I mean, that's more of a third density to have, you know, hate and anger and jealousy and things like that. That's more of a. I mean, they would experience that, of course, but at younger ages, usually, you know, a fifth density being will become jealous and things like that. But as they grow older, their jealousy and things like that, they really don't have it as much.
And have some Germans been successful in breaking away from Dark Fleet, and have you met any?
I'm sure there was, because even with like the Nordics, the Taygetans and stuff, there were breakaway societies. You know, they weren't just all ruled under one people. So I'm sure there was probably like a breakaway like German society. And I remember talking to, I told Robert, I said, I'm going to go, he told me the lieutenant, the doctor of the base was an off-world German. And I said, the next day, it was tomorrow from then, I was going to, meet the doctor of the base, because before you get out of the military, you have one last physical. And I said, you make sure you tell him who and what I am, and you make sure you tell him that I know who and what he is. And because I was having problems, and I didn't know why, physical problems. And they were like, they messed with me in the med bed. They gave me some physical problems. They made my existing physical problems worse, things like that, just out of, I don't know, a few of them were just jerks. And I had these problems, and he said, you probably inherited it from your father and stuff like that. And I was like, this has happened overnight, it felt like. I don't know what's happening to me. And so I came in there, and I didn't serve him one time. I didn't, I just looked at him because I knew what he was. And I remember, like, telepathically, he said something like, we're going to help you, don't you? You know we're trying to help you. And it almost seemed like he was trying to tell me, like, you knew I wasn't involved with what happened to you, right? Like, I wasn't one of the guys who did that, he said. And he said, and we're trying to help you. We're trying to help Earth, is how it seemed like what he was trying to say to me. And I said something back to him, like, a spy is a spy. Like, it didn't matter to me. But, I mean, yeah, in that sense, where I'm going with the story, I think maybe there is. I remember the Dark Fleet, we were going through negotiations with Solar Warden, and they were trying to join our side. They were trying to get away from the reptiles. And I also remember something I never said before. I remember Robert telling me about, I said, well, why don't the Germans like tattoos? Because that was one of the things the first class petty officers did. Do you have any tattoos? I said, no. And he said, good, the Germans don't like tattoos. The guy was interviewing me before I even joined the program. And Robert told me that there's actually an off-world Japanese society. Because with the Axis power, they both kind of got this technology, and they're working together of World War II. And he said a majority of them, I know it's a derogatory term for them, but I don't remember the proper term, but the Yakuza are the primary, like the people in that fleet, that off-world German fleet. And just like, Yakuza in Japan and stuff, they have tattoos from wrist to neck to ankle. And the men do. And he said that the Japanese betrayed the Germans, or at least that's how the Germans thought of it. And the reptiles thought it was such a good betrayal. The reptiles, he told me that they like a good betrayal as long as it's not committed against them. And they thought it was such a good betrayal that they freed the Japanese. So the Germans wound up still being, like the serving class to the reptiles while they let the Japanese go. And I remember working with some of the off-world Japanese. But yeah, he told me that's why the Germans didn't like tattoos, because they didn't like the off-world Japanese. They felt that they betrayed them.
That's pretty wild. I heard the Japanese have the most advanced of the human breakaway technology. Anyway, and do you regret being plucked so abruptly from the German homeworld, considering you had like a betrothed, engagement? And do you ever wonder how that would have played out?
Yeah, and I sometimes have, I don't know if they're false or real memories that I did have more than, maybe I had, I don't, you know what I mean? That's one of those memories where I'm not 100%. How long was I there? Did I marry her? Did I have kids with her? I don't remember. I don't think I did. But yeah, I remember, yeah, when I first got put in the Solar Warden, I was upset about it. But at the same time, I thought, well, at least I'm not around the reptiles anymore, because I really didn't like the reptiles. And I thought it was, these people are, you know, more peaceful and they're better than the reptiles. So.
And let's move on to Solar Warden. Was it multinational, I think you said, but they all spoke English, right?
Yeah, they all spoke English, but I remember, and I think they were mostly from the United States. It was a Navy branch of the, you know, it was part of the Navy. But like I said, I remember Russians. We were working with Russians. We were working with Japanese, maybe some French. But yeah, like I remember we were definitely working together with different countries. It was just they all had their own separate secret space program, and the United States was Solar Warden at the time. Mm-hmm. And then later on, I actually remember it becoming a Space Force. You know, it actually got changed. So Solar Warden just became Space Force, basically. So I remember it.
But isn't Space Force just, you know, dealing with the Earth affairs, whereas Solar Warden does the whole solar system?
Well, I just remember being told about Space Force, and I just kind of had an attitude of, like Navy did all the work and Air Force gets all the credit. Like I was kind of disappointed. I remember like them taking us over in a sense, and we got more like recruited into like a Space Force kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I remember that conversation.
And are all the Solar Warden assets mind wiped? So when we hear of someone saying that they kept all their memories, you know, do we take that with a grain of salt?
No, I don't think they're all mind wiped. I think officers, regular officers that do get put into the program, they don't have their minds wiped. Because I remember the XO and the CO didn't go through a mind wipe. And like I said, the XO had been doing this. He had been doing this for hundreds of years, working in this program, just jumping back and forth, going to the future, coming back, things like that. And the future was his present. Like I said, he told me he was from the year 2580. And, but yeah, I remember him saying, I think like just regular officers that are put in this program don't get their mind wiped. It was only like enlisted or non-commissioned officers that got put in, then they had their mind wiped. But as far as regular officers, I don't believe they have their mind wiped, you know.
And also, the Solar Warden, are they part of the Galactic Confederation? And did you see like a logo with a planet on it? Because that's apparently representative of them.
Yeah, well, I remember the logo of the planet, and there was an anchor over top, and it had almost like the atom lines coming over it. That was their emblem, I remember. And yeah, there was the Alliance, you know, the Federation, whatever. They called it many things, but I remember there was like a positive group of ETs that were all working together. And I remember part of the contract was, it's our materials, but it's their technology. So it's our titanium and things like that to build the ships, but it's their technology. But they could commandeer the ship anytime they want for any reason. So that was part of the deal. And that happened once. I remember that.
That seems fair. And so what was your display and what did you like have to control, what buttons or interface during the piloting?
I just remember there was like they had smart glass pads that were larger and they were on swing arms, and you can kind of pull it towards yourself and use it. And it was for like docking and departing, like from a space station kind of thing. You almost dock to like a space station, you get off, and you go on to smaller ships to go to a world, because a ship that large can't just land on a world like that. It would break apart probably. But I remember in the morning when I would start work, there were two panels, like two black rectangular panels, and I would put my palms on them, and I would just close my eyes and just clear my thoughts. And I remember a voice in my head would say, "Good morning, Daryl." And then I would say, "Good morning, Mama Bear." Because I was the pilot, and I remember Robert told me that you're allowed to give the ship a nickname because you're the one that talks with the ship the most. and the ship has a consciousness, like a female consciousness ad in it, and they don't use it very much, positive ETs, but they do use it for something like a large 4-kilometer long starship like that. It's so advanced that to interact with the artificial intelligence, you do need like a consciousness, but it was like a volunteer that did it. And yeah, I nicknamed the ship Mama Bear, and the ship's official name was Nimitz. But yeah, like you, as the pilot, you would give the like the ship a nickname because you would basically talk to it constantly, and it was almost like an extension of yourself. I don't really remember. I mean, there was like a panel and stuff like that, but it was like an extension of your own mind. It was almost like you kind of joined consciousness with the ship. How it felt. And you would have even not being in the ship, even not holding those panels and keeping that and establishing that connection. I just remember being in the ship. I could communicate with it. You know what I mean? It was just something I was able to do. It was like a shared kind of. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah.
So was it a Taygetan soul?
Yes.
And
female.
Oh, so it just belonged to a Taygetan at one point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
wow.
They volunteer themselves. It's like part of their. You know, they have a fifth density being has more of a mentality of you're doing this for your people. Like they're more selfless. So this is something that you have to do. You know, this is part of what you have to do for your people.
But I guess you would have like visuals of the surroundings of the ship during the telepathic link, right?
Oh yes, yes, and like you could control any part. You know what I mean? It was this. You were like part of the ship. I remember that. But I remember like when we were under attack, whenever somebody, because the ship, it reads like everything, your biometric signatures and everything like that. So it knows who's supposed to be on the ship. And it was like a spy got on the ship. I don't know how it happened, but I remember we were under attack. I remember talking to it as I was running down the hallways to try to figure out what was happening. And it said, breach hall 3, sections 55 and 56. So it was telling me like the last hall had been breached, because how they do it is like, it's almost like piracy, like the mantids, there's so many of them because they are like insects, and they're a big part of like the piracy, like what do you call it, like mercenaries, or they work as mercenaries a lot. And they actually will take these ships that'll hook onto a ship and it'll cut through the halls and they'll just board it. You know, they'll be able to just cut through all the holes if they can get the shields down, which is nearly impossible. Which is like what I said, like there had to be an inside person doing this, you know.
And that raid was part of the Dark Fleet, you found out later. And were there other such raids?
No, that was the only one I could remember. Yeah, I mean, we did. I remember there was like a battle we got into one time that we won, and I remember that. But that was the only time where, you know, we actually got our ship board, because that just doesn't happen. You know, it's something that didn't happen. The shields are just unbelievably strong, you know. It's something that really can't happen.
And you were flying the Nimitz just the third day of being on board, right? And was that thanks to just the sophistication of the tests, or was it just the intuitiveness of the whole process?
I believe the intuitiveness, because like I remember the first day it was the man I knew that he lived in the same room with me for a while, and they like you to live in the same room because you develop more of a telepathic link, and when you're constantly talking to each other and living with each other. And I remember the first day he was just speaking to me telepathically, and I remember I said to him something like, how do I know if this is not just the voice in my head, and how do I know it's you? And he just looked at me and said, it's not. Like, you know, just use, he said, go with your first, you know, instinct. That's what's true. And then the second time, it was almost like they linked me to a computer, and it was like I had these three-dimensional shapes in my head, I guess you would say. And it was like I was taking them apart and folding them and putting them back together and rearranging them. It was almost like a spatial recognition test. And that was to see if I could actually man the ship. And then by the third day, yeah, like I was flying the ship. And it was less, like I said, it was less about physical interaction and more about creating a telepathic link. And the ship almost became like an extension of it.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that's never clarified. So what's the difference between piloting and navigating like a space vessel?
Well, I think it's still a link. But yeah, he was the navigator and I was the pilot. but he would just know how many jumps we had to go. There's the ship itself can create like a jump field, but there's jumps already out in space too that you can use. And yeah, navigating, but if we got into a fight, he would become weapons and I would just become pilot. You know what I mean? So you're not really navigating in the middle of combat. So he would go to weapons, but I was just primarily, just the ship's pilot. But yeah, he would go back and forth from weapon to navigation. And I was pilot.
And did the fact that you made pilot, like as soon as you got scanned, basically, is it always just a factor of your IQ, what job you'll get?
Yes. IQ's high. It's very high, and because the higher IQ you have, the more likely you are to have abilities like remote viewing and telepathy and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're looking for.
So did the Nimitz venture outside of the solar system for battles, I wonder?
I believe so. I mean, this one, like I said, I only remember one major battle, and then that time when the ship got actually raided. I don't remember, it was mostly just like regular war, it's this 90% boredom and 10% fear. Isn't that what a Roman general said one time? It's just, you're mostly just it's monotonous and you're just kind of there.
And could you see outside the ship, like I think you did in the German faction, but in the Solar Warden as well?
Yeah, they had like that same technology that you like in Star Trek that only 10 years ago they admitted is real, and they had transparent aluminum windows on it. And I remember there was like a major window you had as a pilot, but then once you were under attack, like this titanium, like almost like a garage door, almost like a shield slammed down, and then like a holographic image of what you would have seen appeared over top of this titanium shield. So all these like titanium like shutters came down whenever if they call it GQ, general quarters battle stations. If battle stations happen, then these titanium shields would cover the windows.
Cool. And I think you said that nebulas are actually colorful, not black and white.
Yes. Like space is more, yeah, exactly, a lot more colorful than people. Those clouds of pinks, and blues, and reds, yellows, greens, things like that. You were mostly like there was nebula clouds everywhere in space.
Cool. And have you ever docked in Solar Warden bases belonging on moons or planets in the solar system, but outside of Earth and the moon?
Oh yeah. Well, when we went to their like home world, we docked. Yeah, I remember that. But I remember Robert telling me, you've been on more worlds than I have. I remember he said that. He said, you've been more places than I have. But I don't have like a lot of memories of that. Maybe with the, like I said, we worked with them so much, the Arturians and things like that. I believe maybe going to their world. I'm not 100%. Like those memories are more foggy to me. I'm not really good on those memories. But I remember him telling me that. He said, you've been to more worlds than I have. You've been to more places than I have.
That's something. And have you heard of people being sent on more than one like concurrent 20 and back?
Well, yeah, like I said, they always come back. Like before I was going to leave their world, when he told me it's time to go home, I said, I wasn't really pleading, but I was like, no, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. And he said, well, you can do another 20 if you'd like. And I remember him bringing that up, that I could do another 20 if I wanted to.
Immediately after being released from this one, so you would have had 3 of you.
No, I wouldn't have gone back. They just would have extended my tour to 40 years.
I see.
If you're talking about if people ever go back and do it again, I'm not sure about that. But yeah. I remember like before you're done, they come to you and they say, would you like to do another 20? Because they can age regress you a total of 40 years without there being any kind of like I said, psychological damage to you.
Yeah. Were you the only human that got to live exclusively with the Taygetans on the ship?
Oh no, it was like a joint task force. Oh no, well yeah, they had their own part of the ship. Yeah, like they had their own side of the ship and they lived amongst themselves. And yeah, I was the only human that did that. I remember. But I remember female leader. They had the leader cast, and her husband was a warrior caste, and then there was her, and she was shorter than the other women. I remember that, and later on I found out she was half human. So this does happen sometimes, you know. And yeah, she was half human. Maybe that's why she was shorter than the other women.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess your children would have been just three quarters, just a quarter Taygetan then.
Yeah, exactly. But since being on the world and everything else, I really don't think it would affect them that much. I remember asking her if it was difficult for her because she didn't know her father, and she said yes. And I remember she said, yeah, her childhood was a bit difficult for her because it was, you know, she was different.
Mm-hmm. And how much progress have Solar Warden made against the reptilians, which I guess they're arch nemesis, from the beginning of your service, like to the end?
Well, I remember when I was in the service, the moon was freed. I remember that, but I wasn't a part of that. But yeah, the slaves on the moon and stuff like that became free. But most of them wanted to work there, and I remember I recruited a lot of them to fight with us, with the Taygetans. I remember that, and but I remember Robert said you helped them, and as my memory came back, I remember I came to them and I helped them establish more of like a family kind of family unit, rather than they were still living kind of the brothel life where they were just kind of sleeping around with each other. And I encouraged them to start families and have children and things like that, to take care of their children, the men and everything like that. And it helped them a lot. I mean, that's part of who we are as, you know, human beings. And yeah, I remember Robert saying that. He's like, you didn't free the moon, but you helped them.
How did you address so many at once? Was it like a podium or something?
Yeah, it was like a podium on like a walkway higher up. It was inside of the moon, but it was probably like 4 or 5 stories up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was trying to get them to fight with us. I was telling them, you know, I was once like you, you know, but look where I am now, you know, fight with us. I was telling them that.
Mm-hmm. And you at one point boarded one of the Draco ships. And how did it compare to the Taygetan in terms of like style and size?
It was the main like bridge was a lot more open space, but and I think it might have been a bit. The light wasn't as bright; it was a bit darker. But besides that, it was pretty much the same. You know, I remember maybe there were like control panels more like in the center instead of towards the front by the main window, or the main viewing screen. But besides that, it was pretty much similar, pretty much the same.
Interesting. So I guess it caps after a while. There's not so much room for improvisation.
Yeah, they call it universal ET tech, a lot of that stuff. Like when it comes to the smart glasspad, those blue uniforms and stuff like that, everything's pretty similar. It's strange. Yeah, because like you said, you really can't get much better than that.
Mm-hmm. And you got to wear their special, famous, like blue one-piece suit. And it did everything, including like served as boots, right?
Yeah, I remember when you first put it on, it looked like footy pajamas, like a kid's. It was very floppy. But then when you put it on, you slide it over your feet and you just put it over top of you. And then you would just put your hand down and it would go from 2 different pieces to just one piece. It would just meld, like you couldn't even tell there was a seam or anything. And then as soon as you did that, as soon as you put your hand over it, you felt like cushions on your feet, even arch supports, and it snugged up to you. But yeah, it felt like almost like you were wearing nothing, and it helped regulate your temperature. It even ate away like your skin cells and stuff like that. So dust and stuff like that wasn't that much of a problem. I remember on their home world, their furniture had brown kind of sheets you would put over furniture. And they had furniture just kind of like couches and stuff like that. But you would drape these brown sheets over it. And it was kind of similar in the same sense where it would like just dispose of your skin cells and stuff. So there wasn't a lot of dusting needed. There wasn't a lot of cleaning needed. And even these suits, they would, you know, you just wouldn't have any kind of dust really anywhere because these suits would just get rid of the skin cells, which is what dust is.
Well, and when you met your clone as part of the Dark Fleet, did you feel like kinship? And I think Mother told you that that's something that happens. And does that mean that also the Taygetans clone themselves? So that's why she could tell you that?
Well, yeah, it was just something she knew. Yeah, but Like they would use clones if the person died and things like that. Yeah, they could clone them, or they could be reborn. They had like a choice. I'm sure it was something that they discussed before, they passed on. But yeah, it's like this. It's almost like you meet like a long lost twin, like you've known this person your whole life when you make eye contact with them. It's an eerie kind of feeling, and it's an immediate sense of trust. It's almost like meeting a family member that you never knew you had, but you knew they were always there. It's really bizarre. It was a bizarre situation when I met a clone of myself for the first time, definitely.
Right. And now I want to segue into the Taygetan homeworld. Do they pick their professions just based on vocations? And do they take like vacations, for example?
Well, they live so long. That's the thing, is they can remember their past lives. And pretty much from the beginning, almost just about, it seems like. So anything they've ever done, whether it was, the hydroponics on the ship, whether it was pilot, whether it was anything, you know what I mean? They remember that. They can, through their childhood. Their school is almost like a way of, when they're children, their school is a way of just remembering past lives, so you can remember all the other things you did in former lives. And but it's almost like it seemed more like whatever you were determined to do. And there were some who were perfectly happy staying on the homeworld and didn't want to go on ships and stuff, and that was acceptable too. But because there were plenty that would go on the ships, and it seemed almost like the men were more like the homebodies, and the women were more like adventurous, wanted to go like on ships and stuff like that. It seemed more like the men were just satisfied staying at home. And like I said, there was a warrior caste as well, and that wasn't something natural of them. It was something they had to do, like genetically engineer, like a bigger, stronger male. And it was primarily to combat like the reptilians and things like that, because they had, a strong warrior caste. And I remember when we attacked a reptilian ship and we boarded it, the way it works is ET Tech, it seems almost like it does something to like perfectly, but it doesn't do other things as well. So it's like we were in the front, we were almost like the tanks, like the people from the moon and the men I was in charge of. And those suits, they were similar to the ones you wore on Mars, like the cloaking suits, and they were meant for more like high velocity rounds, plasma, laser, things like that. While their warrior casts were behind us, and their suits were more like hand to hand, because there's like certain blades they use and stuff like that when they get the hand to hand. So we were just kind of in front of them, and they were like behind us, almost like I said, tanks, and they were just kind of crouched behind us. And then once we got a certain distance in front, close enough to hand combat, I remember leader said, "What do you want me to say, when you want to disengage, and go to hand combat, when you want to stop using rifles, go to hand." And I said, "Fix bayonets." And it was just a common term they use in the U.S. military for that, for hand-to-hand. And they literally like jumped right over us. Like I remember like maybe a foot being on me or something, jumped right over us, and then they were in the front, and then we were in behind. And that's kind of like how the warfare worked, I remember, was, they just used us as like shields almost until they got close enough to this dense, compact dense of just nothing but warrior caste reptiles. And then they jumped over and they just started using like hand-to-hand weapons, swords and things like that. They have like a curved sword that they used. And their armor was more meant to protect them from, those weapons. And I remember a couple of them were shot in the head just by rounds, and it didn't protect them from that. It was like, it's weird. It's kind of like how ET Tech works. It does something very well, but not so much other things, because it's designed to do this, but not so much the other.
It was specialized, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said that their armor was also quite ornamental, and maybe combined with their looks, there's partly the inspiration for like elves, right?
Elves or angels or something. Yeah, it was very shiny. I'm sure they did have cloaking technology, but we weren't going in there quietly. So I figured, they kind of like want to let them know that they're there. So it was very, very bright and shiny. Yeah, it was like a polished metal, very bright polished metal.
Cool. But I wonder how you would go about teaching someone their past life, because I would guess it would be very personalized, right? And did they have like classrooms for that? And did they have universities at all?
Well, I mean, I just remember like mother was she was like the headmaster of the school that taught the kids. And like I said, that was a huge part of their training, is just remembering their past lives, remembering the memories of all the tasks they did in the past. So I'm sure maybe when their civilization was younger, yeah, I'm sure they had training and things like that. But after they lived so many past lives, that really wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was teaching the kids like guitar and stuff like that, or just music in general, once they got past the theory, just reading music and things like that, they just caught on. They could play pretty much anything. They're very smart. Their fingers are more dexterous than us. They're very just fast learners. It doesn't take them any time at all to learn.
Did they even, like, in time, do you think, master like the harmony and melody they had lacked?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, it was just something, maybe because they're one of the oldest civilizations in the universe. I remember maybe it was just because of something they knew in the past, but just forgot throughout time. I remember they almost saw me as like, they saw me and they saw us like from Earth. They see us more like their ancestors, because time is kind of all happening at once. That's why you can go up and down timelines and things like that. But they saw us that way because they saw us as the way they used to be, like more of like a warring kind of people that eventually became more peaceful.
Like we look at our Aboriginals or so.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They saw us in that same way.
Mm-hmm. And considering how easy it was for you to like teach them all this earth music and sports, do you predict that they went and adopted more of our music, sports, and other arts by now?
Yeah, I'm sure maybe, but they kind of have this way of thinking where, I mean, they'll investigate, but they have their own world and their own culture and, their own problems and things like that. So being amazed at the music really wasn't that surprising to me once I got to learn about them, and they also have kind of like a mentality where if you don't ask them a question, they're not going to tell you. Like, you have to ask them everything. And they're more than happy to tell you anything, but something like whenever I found out she was half human, I was like, why didn't you tell me that? And she said, well, you didn't ask. And it just seemed like something she would just tell you. But they just really have this thing where, I'm not saying they don't really investigate very much or they're just not very intuitive, but that's just how they are. It's different. You have to pretty much ask them everything. So that might also reflect on, would they take the initiative to investigate us further? I don't really know, because they really don't have this kind of, they just don't offer you information. You have to ask them everything.
They need like an intermediary like you were. And do you sometimes wish you could go back and like share more of the Earth culture?
Oh, of course, yes. I mean, you get like a sense that you're cheating. You're cheated. I'm kind of over it now, but at times I get jealous. I get angry. I think, why would I agree to this? I have blame. I get jealous of the me who's still there, and I remember being there and having that feeling. And I remember them, telling me that I was, having difficulty at times. But I think a lot of it was stuff that Aquino was putting into my head, things like that. And like I said, he was able to kind of manipulate my timeline back and forth and things like that. So I think a lot of the jealousy and hate, like anything else, reptile, Archon, fourth density kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think it's gonna be exponentially easier to integrate those memories when you will finish your career return as well. But also, you described forging like a four-wheeled vehicle on that planet. Does that mean that they didn't have any? And what did it look like?
Well, it was temperate, but they had jungle plants. Like, it was more like pine trees, mountainous, lakes, rivers, mountains, but they would have like banana kind of leaves, banana-looking leaf plants. And I actually remember I was in the woods one time. I was going through like an isolation stage, and I saw something that looked similar to a buck, like a deer, but it had a much larger rack and a lot more points. It was just like a 30-point buck, but it was a lot bigger. But it had like these very sharp points coming out, like antlers. And I'm sorry, what was the beginning? You caught me at the end, and
I think there might have been some latency. I also asked about the four-wheeled vehicle that you had created.
Right. They had like a tram system, and they would also just use their smaller ships to get around. I remember I tried to my sons or just others I knew, I would try to put them in the vehicle with me, and I'd have a fun time, but they really didn't seem interested in it. It was very boring to them. They really didn't use four-wheel vehicles like us. It was very quiet. It was white. Even like the rims of the tire were white. I remember that. It was just something they put together for me. And yeah, it was just like a humming kind of electric sound when it went. And I remember Robert, when he was on the world with me, I took him, on this vehicle with me, and he enjoyed it. But they really didn't seem interested in things like that. It just didn't. I guess why bother doing that when we have ships that can go much faster than this? It really doesn't. They have a sense of fun and they enjoy things, but it was more like boring to them.
Well, at least you got through with the other things. Can't all be winners. Yeah. But do they have prisons on their worlds?
I don't remember that. I don't remember prisons, but they do have
crimes.
Yeah, they have crimes and they have laws, of course. And I remember they did they themselves really didn't do it, but I remember that spy on the ship, that German, the first class petty officer who was a German, he was executed by beheading. So they do have a legal system and stuff like that. And I remember I got pretty good with it, and I knew the laws. I wanted to know the laws and all those things. I don't remember the details in and out, but yeah, they have a legal system. But as far as prisons and things like that, if there is a person having problems, whether it's they've been age regressed too many times or maybe they're just having problems, they use almost like a group kind of psychotherapy on you, where it's like a group of maybe elders or just ones that are more experienced with that. They'll kind of run through, and the warrior caste do this too. This is how they stop their sense of their fear of death. They'll run this scenario that's bothering you, going through your head over and over again, and it's almost like you're reliving it, whether it's this bad experience you had in the past, or whatever it is that might be bothering you, and they actually analyze it and say, well, what were the parts of this and how were you feeling? And it's almost just like therapy. It's almost like psychotherapy, but you're actually reliving it, and they're seeing what you're reliving, what your memory is, what is bothering you, and what is causing you to act this way. And so there's not really a lot of crime or anything like that, because with telepaths there's really no secrets, so they kind of know what's in your mind. And if you are thinking of something like that, then they would help you in this way. So there was not a lot of crime because everybody knows what everybody else is thinking, and if they do see one that's kind of having more negative thoughts, they would go through this kind of ritual discernment. It's kind of like psychotherapy that would help you get over it.
So just being a telepathic race reduces the criminality by a lot.
Yeah, because there's no secrets. Everybody knows what you're thinking pretty much. I mean, like I said, there is a kind of way where they can concentrate more on each other and they can have a private conversation. Or there's also a way where you could talk and the kids can't hear you. It's almost like it becomes like a lower pitch in your voice, and it's like children really can't hear you. And so you can have a private conversation without the kids hearing.
And could you ever avoid the group think when you're in a group and just think for yourself?
That was in the beginning. I mean, yeah, when I became more used to it, yeah, I did get to a point where I realized this is my thoughts, this is my voice, this is what I'm thinking. And yeah, even when you were in the group, you could do that. But I remember one time I was talking to the king, and it was after Mother attacked me. I think maybe the reason they liked me is because I was originally third density, and it kind of changed them in a sense where third and fourth density beings see fifth density beings as naive, because it's like their whole policy is if this is mutually beneficial for both of us, then why would you betray us? They really don't have that understanding of some beings are just cruel and want power. So they wanted that. That was another reason why they wanted my lineage and stuff, because bred into their children and things. Because they wanted more of like a streetwise kind of sense. They felt they were kind of naive and things like that. And but yeah, like I remember after Mother attacked me, in my head, it was kind of like in the back recesses of my thoughts. I said, it kind of very low, but I said it. I said, my loyalty is my weakness. And the king stopped and he said, "What did you say?" And I said it again, but more focused. And he said, "No, it's not." And he said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, I started talking out loud to him, and I said, "This is the way I spoke most of my life. And sometimes when I become emotional, my innermost thoughts come out." And he said, "Well, you'll need to work on that." And that's all he really had to say about that. But yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and not everything in fifth density is necessarily better. So it's not necessarily enviable. For example, the perfectly balanced weather and controlled like climate probably comes at the expense of the excitement, right? And so there's plus and minus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know if they genetically augmented themselves or if that's just how they became over time for being such an old species, but they really don't need excitement. They could stay on the ships for a long time, and it would drive like us crazy. But it really doesn't. They have a lot more focus, a lot more discipline, and it really doesn't seem to bother them very much.
Right, but still, they look for boosts that the humans give them in certain aspects. But does it not get colder during the night?
Oh yeah, like it would get chilly at night, but then during the day it would warm up. But yeah, it was like a pretty much a perfect temperature to sleep in. And they had windows, and you can open a window and like let air in and stuff while you're sleeping at night, and it would be fairly cold. I'm not really familiar with I'm Fahrenheit, so it would be around 60 degrees Fahrenheit at night, which is a little chilly, but not too bad. And then it would get up to around 70 during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's close to ideal. And do they have the technology to like watch distant places and maybe even the past and future using like Akashic records or something?
Well, the elders do that. That's pretty much what the elders do. They as they become older, they get much better at remote viewing, anything like that, astral projecting. They'll get into groups and they'll just all meditate, concentrate together, and that's a big way of how what the next move is going to be and things like that. What's going to happen? How can we change this timeline? Is this timeline set in concrete? So that's a big thing that the elders do, and that's most of the elders stay on their home world. Only a couple are on the ship, but yeah, they're very important in that sense that they become a lot more just powerful as they become older
and frailer because they grow so much and become less mobile.
Yeah, they need assistance getting around. They usually have like a kind of like a hover wheelchair on the world. They really don't walk that much. They can walk, but not very far. Their bones become more brittle, and their skin becomes almost like kind of transparent almost because the skin doesn't really grow. Their organs don't grow, but their bones grow, and your skin is an organ, so they get kind of almost like had too much plastic surgery kind of look about them. Their skin really doesn't get wrinkly because their bones kind of stretch the skin, and they get almost like they get very high cheekbones, and they get almost like that on the verge of too much plastic surgery kind of look, like when a person does that. Like their skin looks a little too stretched out, their cheekbones are a little too high, but it's nothing like
it's
upsetting.
not grotesque.
Yeah, it's not grotesque. It's not upsetting, but they just look different.
You would think because they have that technology put into them from an early age that they could bypass this, but this process of growing so much past 2,000 years. But also, how much do you get to like customize your own looks when you do hit puberty?
Well, I mean, even your bones, because you're still growing at that. Afterwards, you really can't do anything with your bones, but when they're still growing and pliable like that, yeah, the technology can do a lot. Like I said, the parents do a lot too. I mean, with technology when they're in the womb and when they're on a cellular level at the time. Like I said, it's as far as I remember, it was the cells, when the cells are splitting, the tech is augmenting the DNA as it's growing, as the cells are splitting. And then once it happens, once they augment it after about, I don't know, about the 300th time, the DNA just starts doing it itself. And so then the tech can just leave it alone and it'll just mature into a regular person. But when they're going through puberty and stuff like that, yeah, I mean, they don't have any tech in them when they're children. They keep all technology out of them when they're children. And it's not till they hit puberty, then they put technology back into them. And then the kids can just go on a smart glass pad and augment different parts of themselves. And that's why they're pretty much perfect looking people, because they have this technology to do this.
Yeah, that's cool. And they take advantage of that small window where they're able to do that. And are they the only sentient race on that planet?
Well, I mean, I remember there were more than one planet. I think Elena Danan has it pretty much on point whenever Tamar and things like that. Because I remember Robert saying to me, he said, you lived on the closest one, but Tamar was where the king was, where the royalty was, the second one. I think that's what it is. I'm not 100%. But I remember I said, well, wasn't it like a big deal to, go on a ship and travel to another world? I was thinking our solar system. And he told me that it takes longer to get this ship prepared than it actually did flying to the other planet, to the other world. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, just getting aboard the ship, sitting down, establishing a telepathic link with the ship. He said that actually, it only takes less than 30 seconds to go from one world to another with these ships.
Probably because of portals.
I don't think it was portals. This is how fast it was. Very fast, very fast. It could have been. I mean, they do have jumps. They do have portals. But he said the way he described it to me was it takes longer to get the ship ready than the actual flight, than the actual travel.
Yeah, and their worlds were they densely populated, and did they have any connections to inner Earth?
I don't know about the inner Earth, but they weren't very densely populated. They were sparse. And like I said, they had almost like cabins. Like a person would have like their own, it wasn't like a log cabin, but it looked kind of like a cottage or a cabin or something like that. And like I said, the city was in the middle where the king was. And that looked almost like I said, like the pennant or like the World Series baseball trophy, as I said. And it was, like where the king was in like a building shaped like a triangle, like a long wedge like that. And it would look like glass and steel. And that was the tallest. And it got shorter, shortest. And then it went up and up and it went back. So it was like this round area, like this circular area of buildings. And there was a courtyard in the middle. And that was like the main city, like the main area. And you could see it from your home. You'd have this small cottage and you could look out your door and see it.
And so they didn't have other sentient species, but they were visited by ETs.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember Reptilian came one time, like a high-ranking Reptilian, and the king, it was almost like politics. I became like his own personal musician, and I remember I would sit in a lot of times, and I would play guitar while they were having meetings or eating and things like that. And that became kind of like my career while I was there. That's what I did.
Right. But also, they didn't appoint kings by bloodline, right? They did it by merit.
I mean, he was very old. I remember that. And whenever they did it with me, it was just, I remember Robert said they were using you, and he smiled and he said, but you didn't mind. It was a way that I guess they thought I wouldn't leave the women I was already with to get to 200 princesses or more. Because it was like I said, they wanted my genetics. They wanted that third density kind of mindset. They wanted more of that. They wanted more of like a wise to if somebody's trying to con you or something like that, because they were easily conned. They were naive, these beings, and they wanted that out of them. Yeah.
So people who are looking forward to ascension might want to reconsider, right? Because it gets stagnant, I guess, in certain ways.
Oh yeah. And like I said, you have less of that. You can control your emotions more. You don't get sad as often. You don't go. You don't become jealous or angry as easily, anyways. You know what I mean? It can happen, but it's very difficult to upset one of them. It's like
so. It seems to me like it's best to have a foot in both densities.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
And what were their bathrooms like?
Well, you know what? I remember on the ship, the bathroom was different, and it was on the ship. It was more almost like a what is it? A duvet kind of thing. Yeah. It was almost like that, where it would dry you off. Yeah. It would dry you off and everything. And I remember the showers were you didn't need a towel on the ship. I remember that. And the shower was just, it's kind of like a regular shower. You wash yourself off. There was like a little gap underneath where you put your hand, and it gave you, like a soap to clean yourself with. But then it would just be like this jet of warm air would just go down and kind of just squeegee the water probably right off.
Inaudible sound, I guess, or vibrations.
Maybe, yeah, but it felt like, it just felt like a warm kind of field, like jet of air that just kind of pushed all the water right off of you. And you were pretty much completely dry almost by the time you got out of the shower. So you really didn't need a towel or anything like that.
Yeah, that even made it into some of the SSPs, that technology. And have you studied some of their history, like how come they got involved with Earth and things like this? Like, what was their origin?
Well, I mean, as far as them getting it, they realized we're a strong ally, and they realized that, what the reptiles are doing to us. We really are we really do have probably one of the highest potentials of any being on Earth, and that's why the reptiles are doing this to us. So they realize that we're strong allies, and they need more allies to combat what's happening. And I would say, on Earth it's working. I would say, it doesn't seem like it right now, but I don't know.
Have they ever mentioned why they were feuding so much with the reptilians themselves?
Well, I mean, the reptiles are just, they see themselves as superior and they want to conquer. And a big part of them is, the suffering, the loosh, things like that. And they're kind of like the exact opposite of that. Where, like I said, they seem naive because they really don't want the power, and they don't want suffering. They really don't want that. But at the same time, they had to grow in order to survive it. And I mean, it's difficult to explain. They're just a much higher, like I said, fifth density is like higher enlightenment, spirituality and technology. They're just much more of a higher enlightened people.
Right. And I think you said that they have a different perspective on good and evil, right? That they see the need for both, and that's why they allowed you to undergo that punishment in the mines and on the Dark Fleet.
Yeah, so one can't exist without the other. I mean, that's just pretty much how it is. It's like positive and negative on a battery. You can't have a current without positive and negative. You have to. It's just the way it is. There's both. It's really not good and evil. Yeah, they really don't have that mindset. Mm-hmm. Both are necessary.
Did you, when you communicated with them, hear them as their voice? And what's the proportion of words to feelings when you were talking to them?
Yeah, they had a specific kind of voice that you heard. And I remember, like I said, it was probably, I mean, as we speak, are you really thinking about the things you're going to say before you say it? Or does this kind of feel like an emotional, like a feeling? Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's more just like, it's more of an emotion. It's more like, can you read someone's facial cues? Now, they don't have facial cues, but I'm just trying to put it in that sense where, a person's facial reactions and things like that, the way they speak can be just as important as the actual words. And so it's I would say maybe a little bit more feeling than the actual, like the words you hear in your head. But like I said, it's just when you actually think about when you're actually speaking, you're really not thinking about what you're going to say. You just kind of say it. It's like as I'm talking to you right now, it just feels like this emotional kind of thing that's happening, And it's the same way with them with telepaths. But like I said, the children are more like more emotion. And like I said, that was one of the reasons they liked me so much, was because I was able to speak to the children, and to the adults it sounds more like I don't know, like baby talk with a word here and there, like, you know,
Big Latin.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Robert told me, he said they have a type of pig Latin, the children, and they forget it after about 5 or 6 years old. But you could speak it, and I remember the adults were very just amazed. They're like, "You understand what they're saying?" Like they didn't understand. I said, "Why can't you do it?" They said, "We just can't. We just can't do it. It's mostly emotion." But yeah, and like even the children were amazed whenever they found out I could talk like them. Yeah, it was interesting.
And could they ever did they ever put images into your mind, like of events?
Yes, images and even one word could mean many things. You know, they could put maybe just 1 or 2 words into your head. And I remember sometimes they would like kind of do this, and they would think about what the person just said to them, because it was more like, as you said, like a more of like a visual. Like you could say car, and what car would mean, you know, a red 81 Toyota with 78,000 miles and a dent in the rear fender, you know, but all they said was car to you, but they would just kind of unpack this one word you said once you said it, because it came along with a visual, along with the word.
Yeah, and did you ever feel like a little behind the pace, or did you match their, was it on a level playing field when you were interacting with them?
I felt behind at times. I remember a lot of times when they had group discussions, I would just kind of be quiet because I knew they were older and smarter than me. But they would have to actually ask me what my opinion was for me to speak up. But like I said, there were other things that they couldn't do. I remember, like, I don't know if I said this, but I remember I could manipulate the aura of the ship itself. And I could do almost like, while we were with the kids, almost do like little like cartoon characters. I could kind of manipulate the aura field of the ship and just create like these little, you know, Bambis and Thumpers and stuff. And the kids thought it was great, but the adults couldn't do that, and they didn't know how I could do that. So there were certain things I could do that they didn't understand, you know. But as far as like intellect, I mean, yeah, they were smarter than me, but there were other things I could do that they found very interesting.
So in the end, it's pretty much a balance. Would you say the 4 months that you spent as king of the Taygetans were the best part of your 20 back?
I mean, no, because, well, I mean, no, I mean, it was tiring. And I remember after, when Leader came up to me, the warrior caste, and he just said, I remember I was in bed with the queen, and she said, "Tomorrow, you know, you're not going to be king anymore. You know that, right?" I just kind of blew it off, like, all right, whatever. And then I guess they knew I would listen to him, and he came up and he said, "Daryl, you're not king anymore. It's time to go. You have to go now." And I remember that was very crushing for me, in a sense where I felt like I failed. And that's when I started living outside. I kind of lived by myself. I became almost like a hermit for a while, and I grew up my beard. And I remember Robert chucked that in on me, because he was at the World too at the time, and he was making sure that everything was okay with me. So I mean, as far as that being the best time, no. But you know, first meeting them, my first kids, things like that, those are the things that stand out more than just being like a king or whatever. But just first becoming accepted by them as far as at their level, I remember that was more important to me than this thing that happened later on. Because like I said, it was kind of crushing. I felt like I failed. I felt like I did something wrong. I wasn't really sure. But it was just, I remember Robert said they were using you, you know, it's like that's what it was. They were just using you in that, you know, genetically.
But you came to terms with it eventually.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Eventually. And I remember, you know, the king even said to me, he said, you know, "What, aren't you jealous?" Because they know that we feel that more. He's like, "You were king once. Aren't you jealous of me?" I said, "No." I said, "It made me, you know, arrogant." And it kind of did. You know, I went from slave to king, so I became arrogant.
So there were no other major perks during your reign beside the 200 concubines?
I mean, not really. I don't. Like I said, it was just they knew that was what I would do. They thought I wouldn't do it because I was happy with the women I was with. I was with, you know, with the 2 women I was with, and I was happy there, and I didn't want to. I probably wouldn't have done it. So, like I said, they can look down timelines and they can see things that they can do to manipulate you, to get you to do the things they want you to do. So they knew that if I inflated my ego, to a point where, yeah, king. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I thought it was great. But yeah, it was like in a sense that, yeah, they wanted, it was more of a, to ensure the survival of my lineage is what the queen said. It was like,
as well as to save your life later on.
It was also to save my life, yeah, but it was also because they wanted my, like I said, they're kind of naive, and they wanted my genetics. They wanted that kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's altering. Yeah, we did that. We covered that in the last interview.
Mm-hmm.
When the Taygetans reach adulthood at like 20, does that mean, and they live like to 3,000 years, does that mean that they're only children for less than 1% of their life?
Yes. Wow. But they reach different levels of maturity. Like at 40, they reach a kind of spiritual maturity. And then at 80, it's like another kind of, so there are like steps. That's when you can start working on the ships and stuff like that. It usually takes, a long time before they even leave you on the ship. Most of them start out around 80 years old. But like I said, they look very young.
Mm-hmm. And how involved were you in the growing up of your hundreds of children? Could you care for so many of them?
In the beginning, I was more involved, but no, later on, it was just kind of like I had kids everywhere. So I really couldn't, I would pick them up and I would do certain things that the adults wouldn't do. They wouldn't pick up their kids very much. I don't know, it was just the way it was. But, I'd put them on my shoulders and stuff. And then it was just, the others started doing things like that. They the kids would become jealous. Like I said, they experience jealousy a lot when they're children, just like our kids do. And so the parents would do that for them, and it became a thing. They started doing that as well, holding their children, picking them up when they were smaller.
Mm-hmm. And so let's move on to Robert, because there are some things that I was really curious, and also to bring it back to your previous reference to 2580. How was he able to time travel so easily, and was it like a privilege of having that high IQ? And did he ever tell you his life story and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he traveled, I know, through the Looking Glass. You can actually, Looking Glass technology, you can definitely go back in time from where you are, and you can see the future with a 94% accuracy. I know there's, timelines can change and things can affect it, so it can change. But it was, so you could step through the Looking Glass. You could either look to see the future, or you could step through it. Or you can go to the past, which is pretty much almost concrete, and see it from then. Because, if things are changed in the past, like I said, unless you're part of that change, nobody really knows it happened. So because it just changes the whole timeline. And he told me he was actually genetically engineered for this job, because he said he had to change the timelines because something went wrong. And I said, well, was it successful, changing the timelines? And he said, yes. And I said, well, if it was successful, then he shouldn't have been born. And I said, well, what about your mom and your dad? He said, my mother's gone, my father's gone, my brothers and sisters are gone, all my friends are gone. And I said, well, what are you doing here? And he said, I don't know. Like he had no idea. Maybe because he was in our timeline and it protected him somehow, but he had no idea. And I said, well, is your wife from that timeline? And he said, no. And I said, well, what happened to your daughter? And he got this really terrified look on his face. He said, I don't know. Like he didn't really know what was going to happen. He was very fearful of that.
This was part of a breeding program that happened in at least in his case, the 26th century, but it lasted 3 centuries. Am I right?
The breeding program? What do you mean? What do you mean?
You mentioned, I think, in that he had been part of the breeding program, and he looked like Mike Pence.
Yeah. There was like breeding programs that happened on Earth. He told me after Hillary Clinton won the election, that's when they stepped in, because we got into this war with China that was designed to be lost on purpose with China, because he said they couldn't defeat us from the inside because of the Second Amendment, because so many people are armed in America, so they had to defeat us from the outside. And it was designed to be lost. And he said by Hillary Clinton's second term, we were like carpet bombed. nuclear weapons, pretty much. He said it just wasn't key targets. He said the United States was carpet bombed and it fell. And yeah, and then he said, yeah, there were like breeding programs after that to kind of like, I don't know, make a superior being or something like that. And they realized that, you know, Earth wasn't going to reach its true potential, he said. He said that we would become stagnant at fifth density and we couldn't go any higher. And I guess if you're not always, your world isn't always evolving, it'll die. Like it has to constantly evolve or it'll die.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to go back and change the timelines. And yeah, he told me he was actually genetically engineered so he could do this because, like I said, his entire family and background and everything was taken away from him.
And in that timeline, they all, I mean, everyone in this program looked like Mike Pence and their wife. And his wife.
Yeah, he told me that, yeah. Well, he told me it was like a breeding program where people from all around the world were being bred together. And then that happened for 100 years. And then they went to Asia and they started interbreeding with the Chinese and the Asians. That happened for 100 years. And then they kind of like marveled at how great they were for 100 years. And then they realized that they weren't going to reach their true potential. So they tried hybriding themselves into, you know, this, I guess they were like a light brown people with kind of Asian looking features. I'm not really sure. But he said that they tried to hybrid themselves to try to get this key that was to unlock a higher density out of them. And it wound up making them all look like Mike Pence, kind of, sort of. And yeah, he told me their hair started to salt and pepper at 50, and then they turned completely white by 60. And their eyebrows were turned white by 70, and they only lived, the average age was 110. He said we had somebody that lived to like 143, you know, it was like one of those record breakers. But that's when I said, like, you know, that's horrible because in Star Trek, they lived to 120. And that's when he told me, you know, Taygeta, they live over 3,000 years. And that's how that conversation happened. But yeah, and he said, you know, Mike Pence's wife has black hair, his son has black hair, and even the daughter that has blonde hair, you can tell she has kind of that orange blonde hair with somebody that has jet black hair that dyes their hair with peroxide to try to make it look blonde. So yeah, his whole family has black hair. And he told me most have brown eyes, some have blue and green, but mostly brown.
And was he like a carbon copy of Mike Pence?
I mean, he was like a spitting image, and he looked like Mike Pence with an extra 30 pounds, a little bit shorter. But he had like that turned up kind of nose, you know, pointed nose. He kind of had like that constant scowl look on his face. You know what I mean? Like Mike Pence does. Like I said, and I even said something like, "Is that scowl look? You know, you always look like you have a scowl on your face. Is that common?" And he said, "Yes, I hear people."
But wouldn't that mean that Mike Pence and his wife are also time travelers?
Yeah, he said Mike Pence is no good. He says Mike Pence is part of like a sector that's trying to stop this. They're trying to stop the changing the timeline so they can survive. And but he says he's no good. He says he's like bad, like, you know.
But he's okay with Trump.
But he just said he was all right. Yeah, he's like Trump's all right. But he said it's not Trump. He said it's the military. It's not just the United States military. It's militaries all around the world that are coming together. Says this is enough. And what he told me was he told me that the straw that broke the camel's back for the military. And this was what, 2005 now, I think. I got there in 2003. I was there for 2 years. I think it was 2005. He said, Daryl, because he told me there's going to be the Civil War. And I was like, oh, Civil Wars are bad. How can you do that? And he's like, no, you're going to want the Civil War. You don't understand. And he said that what did it for the military, he looked at me and he said, Daryl, they start castrating children. And I was like, what? And this was like 2005. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, they start chemically castrating children and castrating. He's like, it gets really bad. And he's like, and that's when the military stepped in, was like the whole transgender thing. He told me that that's when the military stepped in and was like, this is enough. And a lot of those hospitals are being closed right now in the United States and Canada. I'm not sure about worldwide. Hospitals that specialize in that stuff, they're all going bankrupt. Now they're being sued by patients, former patients of theirs and things like that had this procedure done to them. And yeah, I mean, he told me that that's what really did it. That's when the military got upset and stepped in, was when they started trying to do that.
Wow. But he must have been time traveled further back, because he also told you that he used to fly an F-4 Phantom in Vietnam.
Yeah, yeah, he had portraits. He had like pictures of his actual, like photographs of his actual plane on all four walls, like small, just and frames on all four walls. And yeah, he flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam. So yeah, he was. Yeah, that's when he started. He started. He said like, you know, during like the I think the mid '60s. He said earlier mid '60s is when he started his mission. And everybody, yeah, I guess, in the military that he knew was aware of this, of his timeline and stuff. The ones that worked with him personally back in the '60s, they were aware of it.
This might be like the biggest story in the whole SSP, you know, subject, that the mercenary company Kruger is also fighting alongside Warden, I guess, this AI threat, which you could also maybe call like black goo, right? Which is behind the reptilians, and also maybe Animus is another name if you heard it. And that Kruger is the only faction or corporation that has access to technology that can actually go to the original universe of this AI and actually affect it, like kill it.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of this, the changing of the timeline, is Kruger is helping us. I know a lot of people, I don't know, that like talk badly, or I don't know. Like I said, positive and negative. It's really not good and bad. Yeah, Kruger is one of the few. I guess what happened is, like, they were like, as far as what I was told, what he told me was, it was a Germany that won World War II, because I guess it's all similar in the sense that first positive beings came to Germany and said, like, we can help you, but we're only going to give you karmic weapons. And karmic weapons are low-tech weapons, like dropping bombs and stuff like that, stuff falling. It would be able to create like a shield over Berlin, and it would send those bombs right back up, and it would blow that plane up. So it immediately would stop the war, because it would be a suicide. But like the Germans from our world, they didn't want that. So then afterwards, the Greys came to them, and the reptiles and stuff, and they were willing to give them more offensive technology. But this Kruger world, they immediately got help from the more positive beings that were trying to give them just this karmic kind of weaponry. And they took it and they worked together, and with the help, you know, with the Germans and other ETs and stuff, they were able to discover how to go to alternate universes. And they're really the only ones that we know of that can do that, besides the AI itself. And yeah, the AI is almost, the core of the AI is like hidden away in its own universe. And that's why it's so hard to come back, because it can come into our universe, but we can't go to theirs. And yeah, Kruger's mission is to kind of align all the Earths on kind of sort of the same timeline, so we can join together, so we can eventually defeat the AI. That's how I remember.
And this is a process that's probably going to take thousands of years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not going to be overnight, especially with their empire is so vast that, yeah, it's not going to. I mean, as far as our solar system and stuff, that I think that's happening, and it's happening quicker and quicker. But as far as, you know, just taking out the reptilian empire, it's going to take a long time. And I mean the AI itself.
And just finally about Robert, have you come to understand his position of being forced into, because he only really wronged you that one time when he tortured you. Did you come to see, like, to come to terms with that, and that he was being manipulated too through his daughter being threatened? And did you, were you able to forgive him?
Yeah, I forgave him. I mean, you know, I knew he felt bad, you know. He didn't want to do it, and he even said to Aquino, whenever Aquino, the reptile, you know, he handed him a dagger, and he said, cut him from here to here. The first time he said no, like he wouldn't do it, and then he said it to him again, cut him from here to there, and then he did it the second time. But yeah, I mean, at that time, we were really at a point where even positive beings had to work. This is kind of how it works. When your world is ruled by negative beings, the negative beings, they know that you're necessary because you're the positive, but you have to work for them. So, you know what I mean? It's like even positive beings will be forced to do work for the negative side, because, yeah, they'll blackmail you with your children and your family and everything else if you don't do this. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah. And how did you interpret Robert's smile when you asked him whether humanity would managed to like make the jump to 5D, because that's all he did is smile.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think it was something he really didn't want to tell me. Like I said, is it going to happen in our lifetime? Yeah, and he just kind of looked at me. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think what he was trying to tell me is maybe might not happen in our lifetime, but it's going to happen. So don't worry. You know what I mean? I think maybe that's what he was saying. Even if it doesn't happen in our lifetime, it's nothing to worry about. And our lives are going to be pretty good as far as what he told me. Even if we don't make it to fifth density, we're going to be. It's going to be a lot better, and we're going to live a lot. Like I said, pay off a car in 6 months. He told me pay off a house in 3 or 4 years. So the economy's going to be great. You know, it's just everybody's going to work and they're going to enjoy what they do. Things like that.
And he was in tears when he said that.
Yeah. Like he was very proud of himself. Yeah, he was like very proud that he accomplished this because he sacrificed so much to get it done.
And that the reptilians were fleeing, and I guess he was really anti-reptilian and was pretty black and white about it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, he did point out to me right away that there are some, positive reptiles that are helping us and stuff like that. So it's just not all black and white. Even like with the positive beings, there are some positive beings that do, negative things. So, I mean, you got to kind of look at it like that.
Of course. And just out of curiosity, the goon dished out on who he saw, the movie stars that he saw as having used adrenochrome. And could you maybe spill the beans on a couple of them?
Well, I remember guys on the base were saying, Tom Cruise was here the other day. They were talking about that. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, they let him in the underground base. And I had only been in an underground base once, as far as I remember. I had no memory still. This was when I was still in the Navy, when I was still in that command. And we were watching Mission Impossible at the bar. There's a TV in the bar. And he said, Tom Cruise. He said, I got to meet him the other day. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, he went to an underground base and he bought some adrenochrome from us. He said he was the main distributor for the Scientologists. And Robert told me that, that time whenever, I don't know if you remember that, but I don't know if it happened during he time traveled so much he'd get stuff confused. But I remember he went on Good Morning America and he told the host off, and I agreed with him. It was about antidepressants and how Scientologists get people off antidepressants, but he was being kind of a jerk about it. And then he said at the time when Tom Cruise came on Oprah and he started like yelling, I'm in love with Katie Holmes, I'm in love with Katie Holmes, and he was like grabbed Oprah and like threw her on the couch. He said he just got done doing adrenochrome. He's like, that's what you're like manic. You're like, it's like you get super crazy whenever. He's like, yeah, he just got done shooting up like adrenochrome. And yeah, they try to get their same blood type because they get a better rush if they can inject it, but it's so rare sometimes they can't, so they have to drink it. And yeah, and then he told me about Tom Cruise, and he said that, Tom Hanks. He said that Tom Hanks was like the main distributor of it, and that whole thing with them catching coronavirus in Australia, and they had to be locked down. He said that that's where they got him, and they executed him right then and there. And he said that he started bringing up weird stuff. He's like, they're like vampires, is how he put it. And he said it. And if you cut off their supply, they become ghouls. And he talked about how they age very quickly, and it's very painful, and they usually die. It's like you only have to do it once a week. But if you don't do it once a week, your body doesn't really use its stem cells anymore, and you die. It's kind of like steroids. Your body stops producing testosterone if you flood it full of testosterone. And it takes about a month for it to get normal again. It's kind of the same thing with this adrenochrome. It's like the stem cells is what they want more than anything. The high is just kind of like an after effect that they enjoy. But your body really doesn't use its own stem cells, and you can die from this. And he told me that the way they're going to do it, they did it with Tom Hanks, but it didn't work. He refused to do it. They're going to lock you in a cell and they'll feed you and give you water and everything else, but they'll kind of dangle this syringe in front of you and say, if you talk, we'll give you a hit. We'll let you use this drug, and that's just how they're gonna. And you're just gonna see him fall apart right before your very eyes. And but he said Tom Hanks, he didn't talk. He said, but it didn't matter because we got others to talk. But Tom Hanks held out until they just executed him. And he said it was going to be, what is it? A firing squad with no reload. He was very specific about that. I mean, in the sense that, well, with the very high ones, like, you know, the very horrible ones, like Hillary Clinton and things like that, you're going to see those people. They might already be gone. I don't know. But you're going to see like the executions and stuff like that. And, but he said with most of them, they're just going to say, you know, they're going to show them a video of all the stuff they have on them with kids and everything else and murderers and stuff. And they're going to say, you know, a guy's going to come in with a suit, slide a paper and a pen. He's to sign this confession. You have 30 seconds to sign this confession. If you don't do it, then we're publicly going to expose you and you're going to be executed by firing squad with no reload. And, you know, the better option is lethal injection. We'll give you a lethal injection or firing squad with no reload. I said, what do you mean no reload? And he said, you know, if you just get hit like in the liver or something like that, I guess it's a legal thing. They'll just let you bleed out and suffer. You know, like I guess that's a legal thing with a firing squad. They won't reload their weapons and shoot you again. So that's kind of like a fear thing to get him to do it. But yeah, he told me, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, as far as what he was saying, like, and he told me about like the adrenochrome episode on South Park, the Q and adrenochrome episode. I don't know if you saw that, but he said, you know, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and he said, you know, the guys from South Park. And I said, yeah, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And he's like, yeah. He's like, remember when they went to the Oscars? And I said, yeah. I said they went in drag and they were on acid. And he goes, yeah. He said that's because they hate them. And I said, who? He goes, Hollywood. He's like, they hate them. I said, why? Because they're scum. And he told me that the military would approach them to do those episodes, the adrenochrome one, and he called it soft disclosure, in the sense it would kind of plant the seed in the public's mind that like this is real, these people do this stuff. And you know, you can always tell South Park, they always want to tell you what the actual writers are thinking and what they believe at the very end. It's usually, you know, the kids are together and the moral of the story is this, and they do it at the very end. And it was Mr. Garrison, and he was supposed to be Trump, you know what I mean? And he looked right at the camera and he picks up his phone and he goes, yes, I would like to talk to Hollywood. And he looked right at the camera and he said, you child murdering pedophiles. And then that was the end of the show. So, and that's how you can usually tell what like the guys actually think about, you know, not just the jokes of the show, but what they actually think. But he said, yeah, he said the white hats of the military approached them and said, kind of gave them a roundabout what they wanted in the show and let them do the rest. But he said, yeah, that was like something that, you know, the good guys in the military approached him about, was that adrenochrome episode to do that for him. And he called it soft disclosure is what he said.
Yeah, South Park, I find pretty much the last bastion of like humor in terms of cartoons, the last one I can watch. But that also explains why the Tom Cruise looks like 15 years younger, because you said that adrenochrome doesn't just give you the high, it gives you the youthful look, right? The stem cells.
And that's what he said to me, yeah. He said, why do you think Tom Cruise looks perpetually 30 years old? He's like, and I said, well, 35, I think he said. I said, isn't he 35 now? And he said, wait. He said, you'll see. And yeah, just lately he's starting to age, it seems like. But yeah, he said, what do you think this is? Just plastic surgery? And I said, I never really thought about it. And he said, nobody does. Yeah. And even Cher, you know, the singer Cher. Good Lord, what is she, like 76? She doesn't really look much older than when she was in her 20s, you know? She doesn't look that much older.
Yeah, and one last thing I wanted to ask is, you only described this in one interview, and I find it really, you know, prescient. And if you could quickly cover the EXO's Looking Glass predictions on the Russia-Ukraine war.
He told me that Russia would play a big part. He said that Russia would become like the capital of the world kind of thing. It would become of the next 1,000 years of peace and beyond, is how he put it. And he said that the different countries didn't know how to do it. Who would be, you know, the main country of Earth or whatever, if we were going to be visited by ETs? They couldn't really come up with who was going to be the next world power. And so what they came up with was whoever has the most natural resources, and they just agreed to that. And Russia, you know, has a lot of untapped oil and just lots of natural resources, ore and stuff like that, so it became Russia. And he told me that the Slavic people have a big part to play as far as ascending the fifth density. They're highly enlightened people as far as spiritual. spirituality. He calls them the Slavs, but he said that the Anglo-Saxons have a very key part too, and that's what he called Europeans. So you have the Anglo-Saxons and the Slavics, and he said that why do you think our ancestors enslaved them so much? And he was talking about, like with the Vikings, they would usually go into Russia to take slaves. That's the word Slav. It comes from Old Norse. It means slave. And he said because they knew that they were the only other people that were like more spiritually enlightened than them. And that's why it was like almost like they were jealous. And that's why they did that. And that's why a big part of this is going to be, he told me that Russia's going to take back Eastern Europe, but it's not like a communist thing. It's because it's a lot of Slavic people there, and that Russia wants to protect the Slavic people. And he also told me that Alaska is going to go back to Russia as well. And I said, well, why? He's like, well, it belonged to them. And it belongs to them. And I said, well, the people who live there now in Alaska, will they be forced to leave? And he said, no. And I said, well, they have their land and property taken away. He said, no. I said, so they'll just have to become bilingual in Russian? And he said, yes. So it seems like a peaceful thing, but he told me that, it's going to get, it's more than just Ukraine. Russia's going to eventually take back like Eastern Europe because it has to do with and it's not to do with communism. It has to do with the Slavic people because they're going to play a really big part in the ascension. It has a lot to do with it.
So it's going to be non-violent at least, but could you define a little better exactly which part of Eastern Europe they will appropriate?
Well, the Baltics, Ukraine, just, that whole part where, you
I'm curious because I'm in Romania, so.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But he said it's not going to be like, it shouldn't be violent. Probably Ukraine is going to be more violent because that's where the United States was funneling all their money in. I'm sure it was true. I believe he told me that they were working on a genetically engineered like bioweapon to take out, specifically designed for Slavic people. It's so hard to conquer Russia because of the winters and stuff like that. And but yeah, they were working on that in the Ukraine, but also money laundering. So yeah, of course they're going to fight back. But I think but hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it'll happen in our lifetime. And it doesn't, like I said, they're not going to take things. Your life isn't going to change. It's going to become better. And it's just pride. But we have to get to a point where countries are nice and all, but we have to get into space. We have to help. We have to help out. That's part of why the positive ETs are helping us, is because we need to help them as well. And we have to get over our own pride and our own prejudices and things of the past that happened. For this to happen, for us to move on, to the next level, and that's what's happening right now, I believe.
Yeah, there are signs of that, and also mentioned that the UN and NATO both will dissolve.
Yeah, that's done. Yeah, and that's going to be no more.
And even hinted to a possible 1,000 years of peace.
Yeah, he was saying this Q stuff to me like back then. It was like he was like saying stuff, enjoy the show, like he was just kind of like giving me like an inside joke, like I didn't know what was happening, and but yeah, he said 1,000 years of peace and beyond, and like better than it's ever been, even better than the Atlantis. He told me like Atlantis was real, and yeah, that's when he started going in about everything is a lie, everything we've been taught is a lie, and he said all this knowledge is being hoarded in the catacombs of the Vatican, and once all this everything falls down, all this all the UN and everything else like that, we're gonna realize who we actually are and where we actually come from. All that gold, he told me like a septillion, I think, of gold or something like that. Enough to make everybody on Earth 100 millionaire, but it's not going to happen because nobody would work. But it's going to be just ridiculous how good the economy is going to be in our life and everything like that, is what he told me.
Well, one can hope. So
yeah.
We've been at it at about 2.5 hours. So I'd like to thank you for making the time, and we covered a hell of a lot. And if you want to plug something, maybe?
My website is daryldjames.com if you want to visit that. I'm working on a book. It's a process, but yeah, I really don't have very much to sell.
Maybe you're going to be at some future conference?
No, I have nothing planned right now. No.
Okay, well, looking forward to the book anyway. And so, yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks for watching, and catch you next time.